Right, I think everyone's seated, so we'll crack on. First, I'd like to thank the Lloyd Webber family for the use of this fantastic building and helping make this possible today. This amazing building is actually the set for Robin Hood, as you've probably noticed, but if we can just ask any press or anyone taking pictures to not frame the set, because it'll spoil it for the people that coming to see the pantomime, and some of them might be children. So if you are taking pictures or recording, just be really sensitive to just kind of frame the white bit rather than the colourful bit around the outside. That'd be amazing. And any press later on, if you want to do any interviews, we're going to have a little 30-minute interval. We'll do that in the bar above called the Val Parnell Bar. So we've got to kind of be out of the building by around 3:30 so that it's all spick and span for 4 o'clock. So we won't really be doing much after, because we're going to try and get finished for 3 o'clock. After I've said a few words, I'm going to pass on to Paul. He's going to do a little bit more about the running order of the day. And then we'll go for about an hour and 15 minutes with a few speakers and a panel discussion. And then we'll have a short interval for around 30 minutes if you want to get a drink or use the restrooms, anything like that. I can't believe how bright it is. I literally cannot see it. It's like welding. Just over 6 weeks ago, running a business got a lot harder. The end of the tightrope felt like it had been cut. We had all the motivation took away from us, and it's just not good. What is running a business? It's taking risks. It's not all skittles and rainbows. It's solving never-ending problems. It's juggling cash flows to pay wages so families can pay their mortgage. It's about efficiency, innovation, everything to stay competitive, often against overseas rivals. The only thing that's ever constant in business is change. Working with family in a business can be easy in some aspects, but also difficult in others. And I'm sure you can all think of examples of each. Most of you in this room, this splendid room, are generational businesses such as my own. My family's been on our farm for 4 generations in Tarbuck, which is near Liverpool, if anyone had never heard of Tarbuck before. Each generation has left its own mark, from purchasing buildings to tractors costing £300 maybe in the 50s. Combine harvest is £600. To my generation now, where a tractor is £250,000 and a combine is over £500,000. This is why the BPR bar has been set too low in this recent budget. Just last week I was up on a roof. It was a grain store roof that my dad put up in 1985. We actually very quickly outgrew it. And I remember this shed being put up because it's probably one of my earliest memories. I was so excited because there was this big crane in the yard lifting these trusses up. And we had a barn warming party. I don't know how we had the time, but we did. And it was actually in July. It was the same night as Live Aid. I remember it vividly because my uncle was climbing up the sides of the shed and my auntie was telling him off. And I actually asked my mum how old he would have been then. I think he'd have been 34, so I thought, to me, he was always a lot older. Well, obviously now I'm older than him. And I was trying to think whether I'd do the same thing if we had a new barn when there's kids watching. Maybe not. So I was up on the roof last week. I was up on lots of roofs last week after that storm we'd had, fixing some damage. And although the storm had stopped on the Monday, there's still a massive storm raging at the moment. And it's kind of come from not that far down the road on the 30th of October, whenever it was. And that one's still liable to destroy a lot of businesses in this room. I questioned why I was on the roof. And I thought, the business used to be about building assets and making it the business better and more sustainable going forwards. And I thought to myself, all I'm actually doing now is by repairing this building, I'm increasing the value back to how it was. And when this shed was put up, it probably cost, I don't know, £4,000 or £5,000. If you were to build that shed today, it'd be £50,000. With a broken roof, it might have been worth 20. Well, now I've fixed the roof, it's back to that £40,000, £50,000, which then attracts a 20% tax bill to my children. And when you question what you're doing every day, it's just not right, is it? The motivation has just been kicked from under, a stool of motivation has been kicked from underneath us all. Farming is a little bit different to most businesses. We have no control over our output price. But equally, a lot of businesses don't, because they still need to be competitive. All of you who are here have been affected. Some of you may be paying up to 40% inheritance tax, some maybe only 20%. The business, though, only really exists on paper, what you're going to be paying that tax bill for. It's never liquid. Our businesses employ hundreds of thousands of people. We manage environments, landscapes, we maintain communities, and farming we also feed people. And many families we keep a roof over their head, whether that's through wages and the like. They might look like great oak trees, but they started as small acorns by someone with motivation and passion. Then each generation nurtured it through their working life. The problem is, big trees, they're not resistant to storms. Annoyingly, we know this storm is an unintended consequence from the recent budget. In business, we make mistakes, but we change direction very quickly. And possibly the first loss, well, always the first loss, is always the least lost. Will this Chancellor have the honesty and humility to do this? Or will she simply hide, waiting for the fire to go out? Because it won't. A month ago, we had 45,000 farmers on her doorstep. We had a voice. We want to use today as a platform for businesses outside of ag to have a voice. Build a bigger army, so that next time, it won't be 45,000 farmers. It'll be 250,000. It'll be farmers, it'll be family businesses, and all their employees, coming to make a stand for the people over the generations that built Britain and want to continue to into the future. Thank you. I'm just going to introduce you now to Paul Andrews. Do you want that mic? It's back. I picked his notes up.
Thanks, Olly. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the BPR Summit here at the London Palladium. Since the rally in Westminster, the team behind the rally have sought to continue to raise the voice of the farming community and request consultation on the autumn budget and the implications posed by it. Now the audience has been broadened and the voice of the broader family business community needs to be heard. Olly, Martin, Clive, Andrew and the rest of the team that organised that rally continue to do a fantastic job, and I'd like to thank them. My name is Paul Andrews and I am your host this afternoon. I run Family Business United, an organisation that champions the contribution of family firms across all sectors of the economy. In terms of context, there are 4.8 million family firms in the UK today. They employ 13.8 million people and generate £1.7 trillion worth of revenue annually. They also make a significant contribution in terms of taxes. In addition to the millions of people they employ, the income they generate and the wealth they create, family firms play significant roles within the communities in which they operate. Farmers clearing the roads of snow, businesses sponsoring the local sports teams and raising funds for local charities, to name a few. Family business matters. Like farming families, family business owners themselves see themselves as custodians or stewards of their businesses for generations to come. They invest in their businesses, creating growth, innovation and jobs, as they have done for generations, and they seek to pass the business on to the next generation to continue to do the same. They seek to create sustainable businesses for generations to come. The changes to the budget, especially with regard to inheritance tax, changed all of that. Businesses now need to spend money putting plans in place to avoid taxes where they can, or worse than that, create or build funds to pay for future IHT liabilities. And some will have no choice but in due course to sell some or part of the business, possibly to overseas buyers to fund liability on the death of an owner. Businesses do not want to be shackled with growth inhibitors or legislation that prevents growth and investment. This afternoon, you will hear from leading business bodies, family business owners and influencers on the challenges posed by the budget and why the government needs to engage, consult and listen to the businesses that want to build and plan for growth, one that helps address the financial hole in the budget without making it any bigger, and enables farmers and family business owners to do what they do, to do business, to continue to feed the nation and provide jobs, income and stability for generations to come. Thank you. Without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the afternoon, Victoria Vyvyan, the President of the Country Land and Business Association. Welcome, Victoria.
This is a very sombre day, but it is also my first day on the West End stage. So, I hope somebody will see this picture of me. So, in case you are unfamiliar with the CLA, I bumped into somebody just now who said, "You've been very quiet." I said, "Oh my God, I've been speaking every single day since the budget in every single possible place. I think we've had more than 4,000 media hits in that time. So we're all doing everything we can to make noise." And why is the loss of IHT relief potentially disastrous for family businesses and farms? Well, according to the Chancellor, because our investments in our businesses, which we've done, by the way, either by borrowing money from the bank or out of our taxed profits, is an attack. We've been hoarding. I've read this the first time recently. We've been hoarding assets. I thought we were farming, but apparently we were hoarding assets. And those assets themselves have been hoarding personal wealth. And this is just, I think this is at the heart of what's gone wrong here. We know that business property relief and agricultural property relief are business there to save our business assets. They're not about what we've got tucked away somewhere else, which will be which will be taxed in the normal way. It's about protecting multi-generational businesses. So, to the Chancellor, were I to be taking over an economy showing a very, very modest amount of growth, and if I had absolutely no experience of running a business, no idea apparently of the difference between the balance sheet and the profit and loss, if I had been elected on a promise of growth, I think I'd seek wise words from somebody else. I think I'd accept in humility that I don't know everything. And if my eyes lit on inheritance tax, and in particular for today, business property relief, I'd be very tempted to ask this wise person, why did a Labour government in 1976 bring in a relief for multi-generational businesses on their inheritance tax? And because that was in 1976, obviously we'd have to get past the bit where we discussed whether 76 was in fact the year when we had walking on the beaches, or was that the following year? And we'd have a little trip down memory lane because it came immediately before the winter of discontent, which I remember extremely clearly. And it was the winter when we had to use the generator all of the time in the evenings. And when you had the generator on, you could either listen to the radio or have the lights on. That was about as much as it could do. And this wise person might answer, Chancellor, you cannot tax your way to growth. It's simply not the way it works. And this wise person might also say, the tax receipts of thriving small and medium enterprises will always outstrip a smash and grab of capital taxation on these businesses. And this wise advisor might add, Chancellor, could you just think a little bit about the circumstances in which you're going to drop this bombshell? You are going to bring up national insurance contributions to 15%. 15% on a good working wage is a big addition for that business to find. But you're going to bring down the level at which we are liable to pay national insurance contributions. You are going to raise the national minimum living wage, whichever way you call it now, which is fine, but we don't pay the minimum wage. We've always paid at least £1 more than the minimum wage. And everybody else in the business has to have a differentiation that goes on above that. So when we raise the minimum wage above inflation for the second or third year in a row, that's going to affect everybody in the business. This is also the last 2 years when our insurance premiums have gone up by at least 30%. So these are just endless attacks on our business. And also, obviously, some of us have had small business rate relief, and that's going next year. We are beset by costs, real costs of running our businesses, to the point where running a business is prohibitive. And in my part of the world, which is West Cornwall, we call it the let's go surfing defence. Let's just stop doing this. Let's stop paying our taxes. Let's stop doing all the things that are making us have sleepless nights. Scale everything away and go to the beach. But it's okay, we're told by the Chancellor, because these new changes are not going to affect very many people. And I was asked last week at the EFRA Select Committee, were you consulted on these changes to inheritance tax? To which, of course, I had to say, no, we weren't asked at all, and it's not like we hadn't been making representations to the Treasury throughout the years in the run-up to this change. So, no, we weren't consulted. They said, do you think that they've made any plans? They asked this of the young man from the Institute of Fiscal Studies, and he said, impact assessment, no, we didn't look at that. So you didn't have any idea at all what the outcome of this was going to be from the advice you were giving to the Treasury at that time. And that's how it feels, doesn't it, to all of us? That no advice was sought, no advice was taken. And so we weren't consulted, even though we could have been. And on the possible impacts, well, we could have told them a lot. Because when they say, were you affected? Are your businesses affected? There's the single business, which is like the pebble into a pool. And the ripples go out from that. I think earlier I just heard talking about the number of businesses that are dependent on our business. So we think about it in terms of direct employment and indirect employment. What's my first choice? I'm going to have to reduce my wage bills. There's no two ways about that. So I'm going to have to look for ways of actually reducing the number of people we employ in our business. And that's going to happen sooner rather than later. We're also going to have to look very much at the kind of work that we want people to do. For the most part, the only things that we have to have are people who do things. That's the bit you can't do without. All the other bits, the administration, all of that can be outsourced in some way, probably to one of the larger conurbations, instead of being work that's being done in our parish, near our town, in our part of the countryside. And all of the money that we pay those people will all be spent in our location. But not just that. All the family businesses around us, we don't employ them full time. We form a very small part, perhaps, of their annual turnover. Whether it's Bray and Sons, who've just been putting heating into the event space. They do a lot of work around us. It's a really solid family business. But I was thinking of doing lots of other work next year, and now we won't be doing it. And so I'm not saying that losing my business is going to affect Bray's, but over the lot of people losing their business, that might start to have that kind of effect. And then in the relationship between farming and business property relief, you might have been intending to put in a new dairy, a massive investment, a massive number of people who'll be part of that, from the engineers through to the people who make the equipment and so on. You might think to yourself, actually, I think we can squeeze a few more years out of the dairy we've got, and that investment won't happen either. So in every way, we need to be saying to the Chancellor, this is not a few people will be affected. This is our entire community that will be affected. And on the back of all of that, confidence. As I said, it's the go surfing defence. Why should I lie awake all night worrying about perhaps it would just be easier to give up, which again was something that was said just now. A few years ago, in fact in 2022, the CLA was the secretariat for an all-party parliamentary group looking at the rural powerhouse. And we were filled with energy and excitement about growth, the growth potential of the rural economy. The rural economy lags 14 to 16% behind the urban economy in terms of productivity. If we close that gap, the value it would add to the GVA is 40 billion plus. The amount of money that the Chancellor was looking for. So you don't have to slam it out of us. You could just encourage us to grow. And because it was an all-party group, she wouldn't need to feel guilty about only speaking to the Labour Party. She could be actually working in a constructive and collaborative way. There were recommendations in that all-party parliamentary report on housing in rural areas, on planning, on profitable farming, on connectivity, on skills, on tax. And with all of those things, obviously, she'd be able to make a difference to growing our economy rather than shrinking it. So, where does that leave us? It leaves us looking at people asking me all the time, are they going to move? Are they going to change? And it seems really difficult to persuade number 11 not to be filled with pride and resoluteness, which is misplaced, and to actually start talking and listening to the people whose businesses are going to fall back or die away as a result of these choices. All of these choices, not just the inheritance tax choices. And if that happens, if we slip from 14% less productive to 10% productive to 8% less productive, that's going to be an impossible task to overcome. Now, I'm going to take the atmosphere of the pantomime and go back to my father, who used to say, Victoria, if you're thinking you're looking at conspiracy, you're probably looking at cock-up. And so I'm going to assume, for all of these purposes, this is just a bit of a bloody mess, actually. And what they need to do is have the humility to say to these experts, this wise counsel in the room that we have today, I think we've got this wrong. I think we could do this much better. Could you tell us how to grow the rural economy so that it contributes more to Project UK? And the experts in this room will be able to say, yes, actually, we know just how to do that. So, that's our command for the Chancellor today. Stop hiding. When did you last see her out on one of the farms or businesses that are about to die off? I'm not sure she owns a pair of Wellingtons, but I'm sure I can lend her a pair. One of the pairs where the sole has already fallen out, ideally. And I'd like her to come to any one of your businesses. I'd like them to do a day's work. If you've diversified into furnished holiday lets, do a blimming changeover and tell me that's not work. You know, come and do all of the diversified work that we've got in hospitality. And I'm going to leave it there because lots of other people have got plenty to say. But don't crash our economy is our instruction to the Chancellor. Why crash our economy when we can be part of the answer? Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Just there for family businesses in the rural community. We're now going to move forward and actually hear from a couple of those family business owners themselves. The first of our speakers who's going to share his family business insight is Edd Rodgers of Edd Rodger. And Ed, if you'd like to join me on stage, the floor's all yours. And thank you very much for moving. It's all yours, Ed.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've been asked to speak and give an oversight, history of our family business, a bit of a review of the challenges that we face on a daily basis and how the budget has impacted us. Edd Rodger, my grandfather, was a Northamptonshire farmer. He was asked in 1945 by British Timken if he could get a few crates of ball bearings from Duston, Northampton to the Ford plant in Essex. The resourceful farmer purchased a Second World War military truck, and from these humble beginnings our family business, Edd Rodger, was founded. For the next 20 years, the transport company and the farm worked hand in hand. However, in 1966, disaster struck, and my grandfather unexpectedly died, leaving his widow Nancy and 2 young sons, David and John. Nancy found herself widowed and a single mother in 1966. The transport industry back then was certainly not a place for ladies. She could very easily have closed or sold the business. However, she saw the opportunity that a family business could offer her sons. She single-handedly ran the business for 8 years alongside all the normal mothering duties of the time, until her sons were old enough to be involved in the business. Nearly 60 years later, those young boys are still involved in the business. Now aged 70 and 74, David and John have both put in 50 years of hard graft into growing and building a sustainable family business. I emphasise family as alongside myself, my sister and my cousin joined the business in the late 1990s. We have worked within the business for a combined 75 years, and alongside our fathers, that's 175 years of dedication and hard work, endless sleepless nights, taking no salary when we thought the banks might close our business in 2008, ongoing concern that we might, despite our very best efforts, be on the wrong end of an inspection from VOSA, HMRC, the Traffic Commissioner, or any number of nameless European organisations. Since the third generation have joined the business, the extra capacity has allowed us to grow and develop from a British haulier sending 30 trucks each week to Italy to its now current guise of a multifunctional business that ships vehicles and freight all over the world. We employ 115 people from our site in Northampton. This includes all 4 members of one family, 3 generations of another family, and I point that out specifically as over the years we've employed 20 sets of brothers and 15 father and sons. Family isn't just our family. So some of the challenges we face as a family business. In recent times, we've had to deal with Brexit, which has added customs formalities to every single trip we make into the EU and back. This has not only increased cost, but added delays to the jobs that we do. Jobs that would take 5 days now take 6 or 7. This, on the back of that, as a practical basis, has presented a large operational challenge, as our drivers are only allowed to go into the EU for 90 days in 180. On a recent visit to Parliament, looking for support, we were advised to either employ European drivers or go into another industry. Our British drivers are highly skilled and we spend a lot of time training them. So we weren't able to obviously offer that as a service. Every time we transit through Calais, we have ongoing issues with migrants trying to illegally enter our vehicles. Earlier this year, we were fined £66,000 after 6 migrants entered one of our vehicles. You know, the same migrants that cross the channel daily on dinghies. We were told by Border Force that our driver had done nothing wrong. That's the same Border Force that's allowed 30,000 migrants into the country this year. Eventually, after 6 months of worry, concern and appeals, our fine was dropped, but our driver was still fined £1,500. So, the impact of the budget. More sleepless nights. Do we want to grow our business? Why would we? Instead of continuing to grow and pay our corporation tax on profits, we are now looking at ways of protecting our business from being destroyed when eventually our shareholders die. Instead of investing and growing that business, we are looking to put aside money for when the inevitable happens. When sadly my uncle and father die, with the proposed legislation, we will need to find £6 million to continue running our business that we have worked in for 25 years. We will need to sell assets that are crucial for running our business, our yards, our warehouses, our trucks. Like farms without land, a transport company without vehicles does not transport many goods. This in turn would inevitably lead to redundancies. We wouldn't need the same staffing levels. This in turn would shrink our business, we would pay less corporation tax, and therefore we would employ less people. Overnight, our national insurance bill has increased by £165,000. We are not looking to exit our business. We are looking to stay within our business. We are custodians of a family business for our children and hopefully generations to come. We are constantly investing and innovating to provide jobs and grow a sustainable business. We would be supportive, if that's the correct term, of using a matrix where inheritance tax would reduce over a 7 to 10 year period. If we sold our business immediately, then our inheritance tax might be due. But if we stay and grow and develop the business, that inheritance tax is reduced year on year. This would encourage and support growth, not destroy the business that we have painstakingly developed and grown over 80 years. I'll finish by sharing a conversation I had with my father 2 weeks ago whilst discussing the best way forward. Dad's here in the audience today. And let me remind you, this is a man that has given his all to the family business for 50 years, always pays his taxes, wanted the business to be strong to pass on to his family. He said, "Ed, it's probably best for the business if I head to Switzerland in March 2026 and don't come home." I thank you for listening.
Thanks, Ed. A really poignant message to end on, and one that actually Olly, Martin, the rest of the team and I have heard on numerous occasions in the last few months. Quite a sombering note. Every family business has a story, every family business has a narrative and a history, and it's the personal stories that really bring home the implications of the changes to the budget and what it means to people in business, in farms and businesses across the country. Our second personal insight this afternoon is from Kynan Massey of Massey Harper Feeds. Please welcome Kynan to the stage to share his thoughts. Kynan.
Good afternoon, everybody. When the budget was announced, I was sitting in the vets with my dog and read about the proposed changes to agricultural and business property relief, the relief that protects the long-term future of farming and family businesses. I think we all know in the last 5 years we've faced some unprecedented challenges. And as the leader of our business, it is my responsibility to navigate these challenges. We're all aware of COVID, but the Ukraine conflict and the energy crisis have also been incredibly challenging, driven by world events outside our control. But this time, a budget designed for growth has, with one mistaken measure, taken a sledgehammer to the future of farming and family businesses. We've been serving the farming community for nearly 150 years. I'm the 5th generation of the family to run the business. And being a family business is a central part of the culture that has created our success. It's a culture of integrity, reliability, trust, and care. And this culture is echoed throughout family businesses, throughout the country. When we're looking to the future of the business, we take that 10 to 20-year view. It's a real commitment to all the members of our team who work with us. We're offering security to all their families and the communities we're part of. We're really proud of the number of our staff who have worked with us for 20, 30, 40, even 50 years. And then we see the next generation of their family join us as well. And from this long-term view, we've continually invested all our profits and innovated throughout this time. And on the back of this, we have seen our business grow. We've seen our team increase. In fact, since I joined, we have 4 times the number of staff since I joined 30 years ago. In fact, thinking about it, when I joined 30 years ago, my father said to me, "You're the custodian of this business for the next generation." And he wasn't just referring to my children, who coincidentally have recently joined the business, but to the next generation of everybody who's now joined and working with us. And at a stroke, all our thoughts have been shifted from the continuous development of our success to whether we can survive. It starts to sound very familiar, doesn't it? The relation between the business property relief and agricultural property relief. So many farmers have been saying to me the same thing since the budget. We're really in this together. And if I just go into a little more detail about why it'll have such a profound effect on our business. And it's important to understand this. It affects the business, and not just our business, but many of the family businesses that have been represented and we are aware of. So, our example. Our business is worth about £30 million. So with this update to the business property relief, for the business to be passed from one generation to the next, we will have an inheritance tax bill for about £6 million. The £1 million allowance doesn't really make a significant difference to this. This is the 20% the government have stated as half the normal rate of inheritance tax. But the reality is actually quite different. Our family doesn't have this type of money, so the only way to pay it is somehow to take it out of the business. And I think it's already been said, but our options are limited. The drastic option is we just sell the entire business, or we sell a proportion of the business, or do we battle on and take out a massive loan? Looking at the first two options, there's no guarantee that a company coming in to buy us, or part of the business, will continue in the same way. Will they share the same interest in our staff and our communities? The jobs we've created could well be lost. Maybe a foreign business where profits will not be reinvested, but removed from the country. There'll be less competition, which could mean an increase in prices, and then the ongoing increase in inflation that will surely follow. And overall, it actually means there will be a decrease in the tax the company is paid. Looking at the consequences of a loan, we would have to stop our investment plans to 4 or 5 years. We won't be taking any more staff on. In fact, without investment, we'll see the business shrink. And so again, the amount of tax we pay will actually reduce. So what appears to be a tax-raising policy, with the government that's saying it wants to promote growth, will end up being a policy that reduces employment, reduces taxes, and reduces growth. And just to clarify, when the money's taken out of the business, it will be taxed. It's not £6 million we've taken from the business. It's around £10 million. So a business that's currently worth 30 million would be reducing to 20 million. It would take about a third of the value away. I don't know whether our business can survive that. I don't know how many businesses could. And it's worth noting that the family will pay the tax on the entire value of the business since it was founded all those years ago. But when the next generation dies, it just does it all again. And it's similar for all the family businesses across the country. I think it's already been said there are 4.8 million family businesses with 14 million people working in them. Other types of businesses don't have to pay this once in a generation tax. Foreign-owned businesses don't pay this once in a generation tax. It appears to me to be an unfair tax, and it doesn't treat all business equally. And it's difficult to comprehend that a government would give our foreign competitors an advantage over its own businesses. As I've said, we're part of the agricultural sector, and I was thinking about one of our communities I work in northwest Devon, which relies on agriculture, on our farmers. It's not the only one. There are communities like this all across the country. There's the livestock market. We supply feed and other agricultural products. There's the tractor dealers and repair centres, the milking parlour businesses, agricultural accountants, and so on. All these businesses are jeopardised by this policy. And where will it leave these communities? We are proud that we feed the nation. Food security is a topic that rarely reaches the top of the agenda. But now we see increased volatility around the world. We see uncertainty wherever we look. Is this the time to introduce a policy that's going to leave us more reliant on foreign food? So coming back to our business from a purely financial point of view, I think we're better off selling it and going to live overseas. I wonder how many people here or across the country would make that decision. One way or another, the country's at risk of losing the backbone of our farming industry and a vibrant sector of the economy that currently constitutes billions in tax. We all want the best public services. My sister works in the NHS, and it needs all our support. But I hope the government will listen and be certain of the consequences for the future of our agricultural sector, our business, and so many businesses like ours. And it can be certain they will actually be raising taxes with this measure. The government has said it's pro-growth. All we would like is an environment where we can thrive and contribute more to the economy each and every year. Thank you.
Thanks, Kynan. A very simple message there. Family businesses and farming families want an economy where they can thrive and grow for future generations, and they need the regulation and support in order to do so. Next up to share his thoughts with us is Tim Farron. Tim Farron is the Liberal Democrat MP for Westmoreland and Lonsdale, and has been an MP continually since the 5th of May 2005. He currently undertakes the role of Liberal Democrat spokesperson for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Welcome, Tim.
expected to end up here, ever in my life. If you know anything about me at all, you'll know those awful pictures that exist somewhere on the internet of me in a dreadful band in the late 1980s, which was only once had a write-up of any kind whatsoever in the Lancashire Evening Post, where we were dismissed as a fourth-rate New Order. So the WhatsApp group for that fourth-rate New Order still exists, and the photos of me being on the stage of the Palladium is definitely going in it later on. We've made it after all. Today, it is my utter privilege to serve the communities of Westmoreland and Lonsdale, probably better known as the Lake District, the Yorkshire Dales, and large chunks of very, very beautiful parts of central, southern and eastern Cumbria that are not yet in either of those national parks. Those beautiful, beautiful valleys and fells are farmed by just over 1,500 farms of every different kind that you could imagine. Tenanted, private owner occupied, large farms, small farms. And of course the kind of balance is reflective of what you might imagine in the uplands of Cumbria, livestock, dairy, cattle, sheep, but also some poultry and lots of equestrian and a range of other, including some arable farming. And we are dead proud of that legacy. And we speak today about an issue that is a threat to pretty much every single one of those farms that underpin the communities that it is my privilege to represent. You will often hear politicians using the phrase that British farmers are the best in the world. And they're right to say that, by the way, but I strongly believe that the majority of politicians who use that phrase don't understand, A, that it is true, and B, maybe more importantly, why it's true. British farmers are the best in the world because it happens that we have a culture that permits that to be the case. We're talking about the culture of family farming, large and small, around our country. What that means is you've got far better close husbandry for the animals, so our welfare is better than anywhere else in the world. What it means is you have attention to the landscape, a kind of heftedness, not just of the animals, but of the people themselves who care for the landscape and for the environment, for biodiversity, for nature. All of those things together leads to, therefore, better quality produce. And that's why British farmers are the best in the world. But if we don't understand why that's the case, we will make the mistake of undermining the reasons why farming in the UK is so good. And that's why I am incensed by the family farm tax, the change in inheritance tax rules that will impact not just actually on farms, but many other small family businesses, as we heard earlier on. 1 in 4 people in the workforce in my community work for themselves, whether it's in agriculture or something else. And so the BPR changes are just as terrifying to me and my communities as the agricultural property relief changes. And the simple fact is this: the narrative that is put out there is that these are wealthy people who should be paying inheritance tax like everybody else. And that's a complete nonsense when you understand the reality of life in the lakes and the dales. The typical farmer in my community is sitting on a farm that may be worth millions of pounds, and typically they will be earning significantly less than the minimum wage. So what happens to those people if this policy becomes a reality? Well, I'll tell you what happens to it. They will have to sell the farm, or at least parts of the farm, more likely all of it. And who will they sell the farm to? It won't be the next door or otherwise neighbouring family farm, because they're in the same predicament as the people who are in the position having to pay inheritance tax. Quite typically, you'll see people having to spend, come up with £20,000 a year, let's say, over a 10-year period to pay that bill. Well, if your income is 15 grand a year, you do not need to be super brilliant at mathematics at any level in the Bank of England, whatever role you may have had when you worked there, to be able to do those maths and understand that is totally and utterly unsustainable. So we're not going to sell the farm to the neighbouring family farm because they're in the same pickle as we are. Who do they go to? The big corporates. Because it turns out there are lots of reasons to buy up land in the countryside, not just about avoiding inheritance tax. You can buy it up to make sure you take advantage of bogus offsetting schemes and a whole range of other things which draw people to buy land in beautiful places like mine and to do anything but farm it. And so that is wrong. That is morally wrong. To take people earning less than the minimum wage, clear them off the landscape, Lakeland clearances as we would refer to it in our part of the world, clear them off the landscape, and who takes it on? Massive equity firms in London or more likely overseas. That is not egalitarian, that is not progressive, that is immoral, and that is wrong. And not only is it wrong because it is against every measure of equity and fairness you could think of, it is also wrong because it takes land out of active food production. Only 55% of the food we eat in the UK is produced here in the UK. And that is wrong, and that is foolish, and that is stupid. During the pandemic and in the times during the war in Ukraine with Putin's evil invasion of that sovereign country, we have seen times where those things have affected the complacency of the average shopper in the UK, who expects to go to the supermarket and see shelves full in every single aisle. And we now know the shortness of our supply chains means that you could find yourself in a position with empty shelves almost at any given time. For us not to be able to produce the food we need to a higher degree than 55% is incredibly stupid for any country that values its security, food security, or any other kind of security. So to back this measure, which will actively take out more farmland from productive use, from food production use, is immoral, but it's also incredibly stupid. But it's not the only thing that's happening to British farming. I worry that an even more immediate blow to British farming from the budget is the 76% massive drop in the basic payment and that will come next year. That's something that farmers weren't planning for, and it will make the difference between a tenant being able to afford their rent and a tenant not being able to afford their rent. And so much of the focus over the last few weeks about the budget has been the impact on owner-occupiers, on landowners. 1,500 farmers in my patch, like I say. We think 400 to 500 will be directly affected by the family farm tax, but that hasn't factored in all the tenants whose landlords will now, panic-stricken, look to restructure their businesses and find the tenants could potentially be out on their ear also. And the consequences are dire, and they are huge. I want to say something else. When we began the journey of moving towards environmental land management scheme at the beginning of the last Parliament, it's worth saying we probably have a range of different views on whether leaving the EU is a good thing or not here. I would say, as somebody who thought it wasn't a wise idea, the silver lining was getting rid of the Common Agricultural Policy and be able to have an environmental land management scheme of our own, which might be better funded, better and more suited to the needs of British farmers. That was a great opportunity that has been botched by the last government and by this one. We have the opportunity to put more money into farming, to encourage food production, and to encourage farmers to do all those public goods and to reward them for the public goods that they already provide. If I think about my community, I think about Kendal, where we're building flood defences right now. But what people don't see is the work being done in the hills to protect 30,000 people and all those businesses and homes in our main town in South Westmoreland from the flooding that comes naturally from time to time. The work farmers do to defend our towns and cities from flooding that many people who live in those places don't realise has happened in the first place. Protecting our biodiversity, protecting access as well. I mean, I think about the lakes and the dales of Cumbria. 20 million people visit us every year. After London, this is the biggest visitor destination in the entire United Kingdom. And people don't just come because the hotels are nice, brackets, they are, but they come because the landscape is beautifully curated and protected and made accessible by generations upon generations of farmers. A few years ago, the Lake District was awarded World Heritage Site status. We're very, very proud of that. But the reality is, when we were granted it, UNESCO, who made that award, gave as much credit to the farmers as they did to the glaciers that scoured that landscape in the first place. We will see a radical and negative transformation of our landscapes over a very few years if we see a movement away from family farming because of this foolish, short-sighted and cruel policy. And cruel it is. Cruel it is. I don't think I need to tell you, but I want you to know that we feel it and we understand it too. Because I see in my communities people who are 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, even more generations of farmers on their land. And because of these changes, because of the botching of the transition of the last government and the trade deals, because of the inheritance tax changes, because of the additional cut in basic payment by this government, I see people, proud people, but often solitary people, who realise they are staring down the potential of being the one who loses the family farm. It's not their fault, but they believe it's their fault. We all know that what does to people's sense of shame and pride and their mental health. And I am terrified for my farmers, the people I am proud to represent, the consequences for their mental health and for their families as a result of what is happening in this country, not just in this budget, but over the last 5 years in particular. We want the farmers of Great Britain to realise they are loved and they are valued and they matter to every single one of us. Now, I'll tell you this, it might make some of you pleased or not. In only one constituency in the general election did the Labour Party lose its deposit, and it was mine. And the reason, we'll go into the reasons why. So you might find it terribly surprising that Keir Starmer paid a visit to Westmorland and Lonsdale during the general election. And it was because he was doing a party political broadcast all about his personal love for the Langdales that had been a major part of shaping him in his youth and in his adult life. And I'm really glad, I felt moved when he talked about that at the Labour Party conference. I am glad that our beautiful Langdales, that the Lake District has had an impact on somebody who holds such an important position today. I'm proud that he cares about our community. But I want him to understand that what his government is doing is undermining those people who shaped him, seriously undermining the people who shaped him. And that's why this matters. It's why the Liberal Democrats are passionate. It's why we represent so much of rural Britain today, and we're determined to be a voice for rural Britain in the future. And I think the thing that Keir Starmer doesn't get, and the last government didn't get, is the fact that there is not a battle between caring about the environment and producing food. That's what governments get wrong all the time. The reality is simply this: the greenest policies on planet Earth are just bits of paper in a drawer if you haven't got Britain's farmers there on the ground to put them into practice. So our job is to stand with our farmers, value our farmers, and fight for a change in this iniquitous tax, to increase the funding through ELMS to make sure people can afford to farm for the long term, to care for our environment, to protect our planet. I often say, what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning if you're a farmer? Well, you get to feed the country and save the planet. You have an epic mission. It is our humble job to support you and not hinder you. And I'm so proud of you today and the efforts you're putting in to fight against this iniquitous tax. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Tim. Now let me introduce you to the first stage panel, after which we're going to break for a coffee or a beer at the bar. So I'm going to introduce to the stage our chair for the panel, Andrew Ward, and our panellists, Jamie Blackett, David Sowey, Clive Bailey, and Daniel Brown. The floor's yours.
That's right, come on, Clive. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Andrew Ward. I farm in Lincolnshire, 1,500 acres, of which about 550 acres of it's owned, the rest of it's tenanted and contract farmed. But you're not going to hear much about my situation. You've seen that on social media. We've got 4 panellists here. I'm going to be asking some questions about their own sort of situations. So let's get cracking. First of all, Jamie, what's your situation at home and your personal circumstances? How will you be affected?
Well, I farm in southwest Scotland near Dumfries, 1,200 acres, mainly dairy, on a share milking arrangement, pasture-based Kiwi-style dairying, and some arable and some holiday cottages. And what Victoria said earlier about changing over holiday cottages really resonated with me. And so that's my situation, and I am now the owner of my farm. And I'm fortunate, I suppose, in a way, that my father died 4 years ago. If he still owned it, aged 85 he would be now, then I would have a huge problem. I still have a problem because I've now got to take out massive life insurance to cover the handover now that I'm going to have to do to my son rather earlier than I would have planned to do. And that's money that is going to be dead money as far as I'm concerned, that I would have spent on getting hedges laid and getting tree surgeons in to do trees and things like that. And that money that will disappear out of the rural economy now and go into some big life insurance company in the city. And I think that's something that's not perhaps spoken about enough. Well, that's probably enough about me.
Great, thank you. David.
Thank you. Is this working? Yeah. So my name's David Sowey. I'm a farmer in North Yorkshire, farming 440 acres. We were tenants of the Crown Estate. Great-grandfather moved to the farm in 1926. So great-grandfather, grandfather and father. And myself found as tenants, and 10 years ago with the opportunity to buy the farm, or a part of the farm. Obviously a big step, took out some huge borrowings to do that. But since doing that, we've got quite a diverse business. So we've driven the other side of the business to pay the mortgage. So we've got a large firewood business with over 25,000 domestic customers with the firewood business. My wife runs a livery business. We've got 60 horses at livery, and I'd also make the hay caps, the hay and straw covers, which I sell to farmers all over Europe. And we have a small agricultural supply business, basically supplying octopus fencing. So, you know, I feel like I've had challenges. I took over the business in the very early 90s from my father. It wasn't in the finest state. Managed to get things on an even keel. We then got the opportunity to buy the farm, which was amazing. Fortunately, the bank backed us to do that. And then after that, my brother decided to retire. So fortunately, we did that completely amicably. But buying him out of the business involved quite a large capital gains tax, which we came. And I just felt like, you know, this year we're starting to get back on a bit of an even keel, and we're suddenly hammered by the APR and the BPR. The terrifying thing for me about the whole thing is that the BPR seems to have hidden behind the APR. Everyone's talking about the APR, where no one's talking about the BPR. And it's amazing how many business people I've spoken to over the last few weeks who are clueless about what's coming. So looking at even though I'm of an age, I was a bit of a late starter in life, my children are quite young. Looking at the bill they would face, and the debt we all already carry, I would definitely encourage them not to take this business forward. It would you know, I know what it's like to carry debt, I know what it's like to cope with debt, and is it a life that I really want for them? Possibly not. So, you know, I'm really hoping, hence here's there, that we can get them to reel back on this or change it in some way.
Great, thanks very much, David. So, Dan.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Brown. I farm on the Suffolk-Cambridgeshire border between sort of Mildenhall, which is a big American air base, and Ely, which is a tiny town that calls itself a city because it's got a cathedral. Back in 2000, I was 18, didn't know what I wanted to do. The family farm was a dairy farm, and I knew I didn't want to do that. I did not want to get up at 5:30 in the morning to look at the back of a cow. So I went off to university and did business management. I thought, fairly arrogantly, I don't need to go to Harper Adams or an ag college because I know it all already. I'll go and do something else outside of agriculture. So I did, but then 3 years later, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And when I'd been doing sixth form, I'd done a case study on this new industry called free-range eggs. So I finished university 3 years later, and Dad said, free-range eggs are still growing. We should really look into this. So I did, and in 2004, we built a 12,000 bird free-range shed. Now, you don't give big sheds to 22-year-olds who haven't met. I was single at the time, fresh out of university. You know, my life kind of revolved more around where I was going snowboarding next than any kind of sort of financial stability. So it was done in my parents' name, which is what you should. All the advice was put the assets in your mum and dad's name. Over the last 20 years, those 12,000 birds have become 64,000. It's taken several £1 million worth of investment. We also have, we farm about 650 acres, of which half is rented in and half is owned. And that all goes into the pot for IHT. And we're here to talk today about other businesses other than farming, and I'll perhaps come back later to why I think poultry is a bit different to straight arable farming in terms of the IHT liability.
Great, thanks very much, Dan. Thank you for that. Clive, over to you.
Thank you. I didn't realise how much I had in common with Dan, actually. It's similar stories, but without the chicken, but yeah, not like in the cattle. So yeah, I'm Clive Bailey. I'm a third generation farmer. We farm in Staffordshire, all arable, so all combinable crops. My grandfather was that first generation. He started just at the end of the Second World War, a tenant farmer with 8 acres that he managed to rent, and a couple of cows that he built up, managed to buy the farm over time. And of course, at the end of the war, people were still under rationing, so food security was very understood and I think very much in front of people's minds. So as a result, he got to farm through a period where the returns on his investment, the return on his capital and the return on all his hard work paid much better than it does today. So as a result of that, he was able to invest. He kind of put pretty much everything he made farming back into the farm and built the business up for my father, who took control of it in the late 60s, early 70s. And my father had the same kind of thing. He farmed for a period, milking cows, which again, like Dan, I wasn't particularly interested in. But kept reinvesting, kept building up. They made personal sacrifices, building a business that then I came back from. The cows had gone, foot and mouth kind of ended the dairy history for our family farm. But when I came back from university and decided that maybe farming was what I wanted to do, I guess, and this is the thing that I guess socialism doesn't get. You could argue that I came into like a silver spoon, what a wonderful position. Most people don't get that chance. They don't start with this kind of base of a farm to start with. But the reality is it wasn't like that. The farm carried significant debt at that time still because it was still investing and still trying to grow. So although from the outside it might look like you're inheriting something fantastic, it doesn't come without those consequences. But also, what it gave me the ability to do, it gave me the ability to continue to grow that. And also, I'm not just a farmer, I then invested in other businesses. So I have a commercial and residential property business and a digital media business. The investment I was able to make into both those businesses was really due to that start that previous generations have given me. They gave me a base to be able to it would be really hard to start those businesses from absolutely nothing. I was able to leverage and kind of make the investments that have grown those businesses as well. So I sit here today with a farmer hat on and obviously involved in organising that first rally from the farm point of view, but also as an owner of 2 other successful businesses that employ people, pay their taxes, contribute to the economy. But right now, listening to that earlier speaker from CLA, I just feel more inclined to take the surfing kind of approach going forward. And quite frankly, if I do go surfing, it'll be somewhere warmer than Cornwall where taxes are a lot kinder. So that's where we are right now.
Great, thanks very much, Clive. Thank you. I'm just going to read out a few stats. The CBI did a survey where they looked at 48 businesses and there were 234 of them family owned. 1 or 2 of these figures we've heard this morning, but 92% of those businesses have a worth of more than 1 million. So that's where obviously the 1 million threshold is wrong. 85% of the family businesses in this survey will decrease their investment by an average of 17%. 54% will decrease their headcount by 10%. And 41% expect turnover to drop by at least 7%. And there's overwhelming majority of family-owned businesses expect detrimental impact from changes to the business property relief. And of those, 32% will downsize their business or reduce investment or headcount or all of them. And so scrapping BPR, we've already heard this morning, it's all over the press, will lead to 125,700 job losses in the 5 years. And when you start to look at the revenue, there'll be 1.4 billion raised in the revenue from this tax in the 5 years, but they anticipate a 2.6 billion reduction with reduced activity of investment, spending, and the increase on the NICs. So you can see how the massive impact it's going to have, which I think a lot of those things the government haven't looked at. Just I think one other thing that's been touched on, and maybe some people haven't thought of too much, is about the amount of, when you start to look at the value of the land and the value of a business, is it on the book value or is it on the actual saleable value? Because I think there is a huge difference here. What does anybody here think that we've got to that?
Well, I imagine it'd be on a sort of probate value, but what's shocking to me, I spent the first 20 years of my life in the army, and I was involved in large headquarters planning campaigns. And we were always asked to say, what if the enemy does this? What if the enemy does that? We spent weeks and weeks before committing troops into any battlefield, on all the scenario planning, what might happen. And it's very clear from what you've been saying, what everybody's been saying so far this morning, that the Treasury simply are not fit for purpose because they've failed to do that. They have had no idea, they've had no impact assessment, no planning of what's likely to happen. And we've heard from everybody, we're all in the same boat here, that we're simply going to stop investing in our businesses while we deal with this problem, however we're going to deal with it, with the life insurance and the handover route for those of us lucky enough to do it, with this 7-year loophole, as they sort of try and portray it as, or somehow cushioning the next generation for the tax when it comes. And I think that's really very shocking and something that perhaps hasn't been looked at enough. I mean, I think certainly, I don't know if there are any Conservative people here, but Mel Stride probably needs to sack the whole lot in the Treasury and start again with a fresh team of people, the brightest and the best people in the country in there, so that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. Because sure, it's a cock-up, and it's probably a cock-up that's enabled by a state of mind in government that thinks that it's better to have the likes of BlackRock and large corporations owning businesses than families. And that's informed by the sort of Marxist thinking that you need to have everybody reliant on the state rather than on families.
Right, thank you, David. Jamie, that's very appropriate. David, you mentioned at the start, you said about you were going to advise your children not to carry the business forward. Have you done that? Is that what you're going to do, or will it depend on circumstances in the next few years?
It won't actually be my choice. I can look at my eldest son, and it's a carbon copy of what I was. There'll be no stopping him farming, I'm absolutely sure. I would give him a serious chat about what it's like to carry the debt. And some of the speakers have alluded to the worry that you go through. You know, when I first took over the business in the 90s, the business carried a lot of debt, and it was. I thought it was too much debt really and I remember trying to sort it out with the bank at the time in the 90s, and I had 3 years of absolute heartache, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone, never mind my own children. But funny, to go back to the point of the valuation, I have a biomass boiler, a megawatt biomass boiler. Olly has a similar. I think the cost was about 280,000. It's got 12 years of RXI left in it. I think the value is over £1 million. How would that be valued in the BPI? No one seems to really know. There's so little information. But yeah, next generation will make their own minds up. We just hope it's a bit better, a better situation than we've got at the moment than certainly we've had over the last few years.
Great, thank you, David. Daniel, you mentioned about poultry being different, and you wanted to touch on it.
Well, I think this comes to what really grinds my gears about this, which is that poultry sheds are a depreciating asset. The moment you build them, they're a specialist building full of ventilation and equipment, and a 32,000 bird chicken shed now, to put a figure on it, would be about £2 million. So they're an expensive shed, and if you get fed up with chickens, you can't do much else with it. You can't put grain in it, you can't rent it out for light industrial, they're just not suitable for that. So firstly, it's a depreciating asset. Secondly, in my situation, and free-range eggs is something a lot of younger farmers like me have gone into. If you're hemmed in on all sides by big arable farms like we are, one of which is a huge pension company, by the way, which won't pay inheritance tax, but how do you expand your arable business when all around you are 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 acre farms? You don't, so you go into something else. So quite a few younger people like me have gone into free-range, and they will now pay 20% inheritance tax on the shed that they built with their father, with their mum's not day to day, but she does all the bookwork and she's a partner. So it's not just a tax on inherited assets, it's a tax on the assets that you have built up in your... I've been doing it now for 20 years, I know I don't look like that, but 20 years, and I'm 42, so I've got another... I don't know, maybe I could do early retirement, but probably Dad's still fully involved in the business at age 70. But Dad could now gift it to me, and he probably would live 7 years. He's in reasonable health. He's had a heart attack and prostate cancer, but so he'll never get but he's made good recoveries from them, but he's never getting any kind of life insurance, no chance. What do I do with my 7-year-old and my 5-year-old? If he survives 7 years, I then sort of am free of inheritance tax by the time I'm 49. I can't then gift it to a 14-year-old girl. There's always going to be a gap, isn't there? And that's what really sort of winds me up. Obviously, the land we've got, 300 acres, will incur inheritance tax. And I've had a very cavalier approach to debt over the years. We've probably invested 3 million in chicken sheds and feed milling equipment, and we've used the 300 acres to get it, otherwise the bank wouldn't have done it. But it was a bit of a risk. I've gone grey a bit earlier than I should have, probably. And what was the point, you know? And sorry, I'm going on now, but in egg production, cages are being scaled down. Nobody wants caged eggs anymore. You need to then build new free-range chicken sheds to supply the gap. My egg packer said to me the other day at a conference, Daniel, we wouldn't mind another one to fill, because we're losing 450,000 cage birds and we need to fill that gap. But that shed that now costs 2 million, 20% of it immediately belongs to Keir Starmer. So it's actually 2.4 million. So why bother? It's just stifling growth.
Yeah, great, thank you. You think you're going grey? Look at me. Clive, over to you. And I know you've got sort of two sort of businesses with your property and the farm. Are they interlinked? And when you start to looking at handing them over, obviously the one's going to have a lot more implications than the other.
Yeah, and Daniel touched on it there, so to kind of explain a little bit further. I mean, I've got 2 children myself. They're both quite young. They're both just started secondary school kind of ages. And rather conveniently, one of them's mad keen into farming. The other one's kind of mad keen in property and digital stuff. So it could work out. It would have worked out really quite well. The son going into farming, it'd be really hard to recommend that to him now. I mean, you know, as has been bandied around a lot, this 0.5% return on capital invested type figure, when they're effectively landed with a 2% per year. If we use the kind of 10-year interest free to pay the 20%, that's 2%. There's a 1.5% problem right there. That's blindingly obvious, and you expect any chancellor who's done an impact assessment to be able to do that much. That's before anyone's lived, by the way. So I couldn't recommend that. But as Andrew said, and as Dan just touched on there, the reason I've been able to expand the farm and turn that into business that employs more people and, you know, hopefully most years makes a little bit of money and pays some tax, the reason I've been able to do that is because of those diversifications, because I've kind of used that base that I was fortunate enough to kind of start with from those previous generations. I've been able to leverage that to build those other businesses, and that's allowed me to invest that money, in a lot of cases, back into the farming business. So I've also expanded the farming acreage. That's turned out to be a fantastic investment, not because of farming, but because so many other people with other uses want to buy the land. So I think the first land I bought was £2,500 an acre. I've also bought land at £5,000–6,000 an acre. It's worth 20, 25, maybe even £30,000 an acre around in my area now. So that's been a fantastic investment. But I don't see any of it as wealth, because like the previous generations, I'm just the custodian of that. My income is what I can make from my businesses, not what they're worth, because they were intended to pass on to children. But what I've also done there is, as my father and mother, who are still alive, both in their late 70s, neither of which enjoying best health, both completely uninsurable. Mom's actually under a power of attorney because she has Alzheimer's and dementia, so we can't make any changes relating to her estate at all. But what I've unwittingly done is I've made them, to some extent, a lot better off. So I'm going to get taxed again on that. So I've kind of made them as partners in that business even more wealth, which is what Dan was saying, really. So it's kind of like tax on money that, to some extent, I've made in the last 30, 40 years.
I mean, I think as well, when you start... One thing that I think it comes out of this as well is anybody that's got to sell anything to pay any of these taxes, you then get clobbered with capital gains tax, so you get a double whammy. Just looking, David, you've got different...
Also on that, Andrew, just to jump in, how do you sell 20% of a chicken shed?
Exactly, I know.
You can't...
Or a dairy.
Farmland, maybe, but you can't in all sectors.
No, that's exactly right. It's very, very... And I don't think that the Treasury realised that. David, you've got some different arms to... different arrows to the bow. have you ever considered, or anybody to be honest, has anybody considered downsizing or selling off one of your aspects, or downsizing to actually, so you haven't got so much worth?
Yeah, that would certainly be a solution, but I haven't got my head around the whole thing yet. You know, we've been so focused on growing, basically to manage the debt we've already got. But I think what a lot of people in politics don't understand is exactly what we alluded to before, that the farm is never ours to sell. You know, it's a vehicle that you're given to drive for your lifetime, and then you pass it on. That, you know, the biggest disaster you can have as a farmer is having to sell the farm or sell something to do it. So I haven't got my head around it. That would certainly be an option, but you know, I still feel I want to grow the business, and it's you know, I still feel I've got a lot of ideas. So selling part of it may be a solution, but not one that I've considered at this stage.
Jamie?
Well, for my family, this is real deja vu, because in the 70s we were completely clobbered by inheritance tax, and the solution we found then was to sell off most of the land and then lease it back again. So we carried on as tenants. And it was sold, guess what, to a large insurance company who never actually visited, never invested anything in it, and the whole infrastructure really decayed to the point where it was in really quite a bad way. And I was very lucky 20 years ago, just over 20 years ago, to be able to buy it back. And as soon as we were owner-occupiers again, we started investing in the business, and we've grown, and we put on a dairy 4 years ago, which has probably added a couple of million to the inheritance tax headache. Certainly cost a lot of that to invest in it. And I just feel that you know, we're being punished now a second time. We've got this disaster. We had last time it was old-fashioned socialism. Now we've got a modern variant. We've got corporate socialism, which is really the old idea, but dressed up and made to look a bit sexier with Starmer and all his Davos mates. They have a different idea of the way the economy should work. They don't nationalise it. They just allow big corporates to move in and clear off all the kulaks and run everything from large businesses. And so I think, you know, we've seen it all before. I guess what we would do, I don't know, we probably, if we had to do that, maybe we would try and find some corporate partner and do a sale and leaseback arrangement, but I pray that doesn't have to happen. And it's just so depressing to be back here again. It's still in my lifetime, 50 years on from the 70s, talking about the same things again. And let's hope that this time round we get going with a proper winter of discontent and let everybody know exactly what we feel about this and bring things to a head rather quicker than it happened last time, and see if we can reverse this.
Clive?
Well, since this budget, my attitude's changed completely, because really it's made me sit back and pause and think. I'm 51, I hate to say it, I wish it was starting in the 4 still, but and you kind of, as it's been pointed out by, you know, every socialist on social media, if you own land, you're a wealthy person, right? If you're going to sell it. I never saw it like that. It was custodianship for my children. But if I'm now in a situation where I can't keep it for their benefit, or for them to have that same start that I was to then hopefully go on and build something even bigger, even better. I mean, they're far brighter, far more, you know, kind of got far more opportunities than I would have had even. If that's not going to be the case, if all I'm going to do is saddle them with like a big tax bill to pay in debt, and continue to work on farming type returns of 0.5%, 1%, maybe 1.5% if you're really, really good at it, why would I do that when I could take the option of just selling it all, you know, this year, paying my 24% or whatever it is now capital gains tax, and spending the next 20, 30 years of my life living happily ever after? It's a far easier option. But if I do that, take the surfing option as it was kind of called, I like that term, take that option, I won't, once I've paid that capital gains tax, that's it. I won't be paying any more corporation tax, any more income tax, any more VAT, any more national insurance contributions from my employees. All of that will go. So that's not growth. It's if people like me that have built businesses, expanded the farm, employed people, are feeling in that place now, that's not going to generate growth. We're going to get the opposite. So, I think we've got the mother of all recessions coming, quite frankly. I can't see any other way this economy goes. I don't think there's ever been an example of an economy that's taxed its way into growth, ever. So they're trying to achieve an economic miracle here, which, frankly, is not going to happen, is it?
Thank you, Clive. Right, one last question. We've just got time before we finish. One last question. What do each of you want to see now happen? Do you want a consultation? Do you want the threshold altering? Is there a compromise to be had? Do you want it scrapping completely? What would be your wish from now on? Start down the line here. 2 minutes, Jamie.
Well, I think they need to listen, and they need to listen to their own advisors who are telling them this is a bad idea. I think Dan Needle's idea of some sort of clawback, raise the threshold and then have a clawback if a farm is sold, that'd be fair enough to pay inheritance tax as if it was any other sort of asset, would be fair enough. And they need to listen, and if they don't listen, then I think we need to get out there and really revolt in a civil disobedience in a way that is going to actually bring the government to its senses. And so far, it's been just farming, and I'm uncomfortable with that because I don't like arguing that we should be made an exception of. It needs to be all businesses. And next time, when there are tractors driving down Whitehall, we need lorries, hearses, all the other businesses need to be there as well. Because if you're not a farmer and you're sitting in the audience, then there's a big question for you. Where have you been in the last 3 weeks?
Right, thank you. David?
Yeah, I agree mostly with that. I think we need to keep the pressure on. We need I think we need to make sure that other businesses are aware of the BPR and the impact it's going to have on them. I mean, scrap it would be great, isn't going to happen. Raise the threshold. The threshold on the APR should be 10 or possibly 20 million. If they really were aiming at the people who are hiding money to do away with the inheritance tax, that's where the level should be. But I don't think the government are going to listen. I think we need to ramp this up. I think, again, civil disobedience, I don't like the French style rioting. I think we just need to keep the pressure on. We need to just to keep ramping up and get other businesses involved and make sure that everyone is aware of how this is going to affect everybody, the smaller businesses.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. Daniel?
I'm no more of an economist than Rachel Reeves is a business person, so I'm not going to say what I'd do. I would pause it and I'd want to look at the unintended consequences of the Dan Needle plan, because it sounds good to me, but there may be something wrong with it. And I'd pause it straight away because we've got the Claydon brothers sat over there who sold me a seed drill a couple of months ago. That would now cost me another 20% in theory, because it goes into the pot for IHT. I was speaking to a lady who owns an electrical firm out in the lobby. Her business is being hit by this uncertainty. I spoke to another machinery manufacturer the other day who said his order book's empty from mid-January onwards because every farmer's just gone, put that on stop, it's too uncertain, I'm not buying anything. And it's not just farming. We employed some electricians for about 2 months last autumn to do a big chicken shed refurbishment. 3 or 4 lads stayed down in Airbnb and just worked for us basically for 2 months. I wouldn't be doing that, they wouldn't have a job. We've got to get some certainty back into
into
business.
Thank you. Clive, 2 minutes please, not 22.
Yeah, well, quite simply, just take a pause, like Dan said. Speak to experts and consultants. Take away the massive stress that everyone's under right now. I don't want to sit around the Christmas dinner table, kind of half hoping my mum or dad might choke on a sprout and it's all sorted before April 2026. They're not conversations we should be having or thoughts we should be having, are they? So I think they need to understand the human consequence right now, and that side of it's important. And then secondly, I just want a government that is more sensible about its tax. Trying to tax wealth isn't the same as trying to tax our income or our profits. Yeah, I don't think any of us are sitting here thinking we don't want to pay any tax. We all want the services and the infrastructure that the country like this deserves. But trying to take it from wealth rather than kind of profits and income, that's where it's wrong. So they just need to really, quit with this trying to tax wealth, because we haven't actually got the liquid funds to pay that.
Thank you, Clive. Well, I do hope you enjoy your Christmas lunch. And just from me, I think what I would like to see is that nobody should be paying, whether it's APR or BPR, nobody should be paying inheritance tax at all, no matter what the business or industry is. It's as simple as that. And I think, but it's not just about those two things, is it? The budget, there's a whole load of things in the budget that's massively impacting on every business. And I think it's the whole budget that we really need to be looking at and trying to deal with and plan, because it's the budget, the contents of the whole thing that's the catastrophe that we've got at the minute. Anyway, thank you ever so much to the whole panel. That's it for this session. We've now got a short break. Thank you.
Many thanks to my panel. Plenty there for you all to take away, and I know it resonated with many of you in the room. Just a couple of takeaways. The mental health agenda, the amount of angst and conversation that's going around kitchen tables, boardrooms at the moment in terms of what's going on. Remember that you have got peers, you have got other businesses out there. Please do talk to each other and help each other through this, because the mental challenge we're all going through is immense. It's a much broader business agenda and not just farming. That's part of the reason that Olly and the team have wanted this to happen. It's gaining momentum, so it's not just farming, it's now business coming together collectively to raise and amplify the voice of family firms. One quick request. Olly spoke to an industrialist about 10 minutes ago at the back of the room. If he could make his way to the corner and meet Olly, Olly'd like to follow up with him. Members of the press, you're invited up to the Val Parnell bar on the first floor, where all our speakers are available to talk to you if you want to. We're now going to break. Please have a coffee, stretch your legs. We're back in here to start again. If you can sit near the front, it doesn't matter where you sit when you come back. Sit where you want to. Sit near the front. Good for the photos, good for PR, good for the message. Have a coffee. We'll see you back in here at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can ask you to take your seats, please. Thank you. Smile. Just before lunch, we finished the sessions, and there were a couple of questions around the broader business community. So you're going to hear a little bit more this afternoon now from the broader business community. I'm going to start off, and I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Paul Harrison, who's going to join us to talk about the broader implications for broader businesses around the country in terms of the national insurance changes and the national minimum wage. Paul, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Paul, and good afternoon, everybody. Just a quick introduction. I'm Paul Harrison, and I operate my own consultancy business, just myself, in agriculture, predominantly with dealerships and smaller equipment manufacturers. And I've been asked today to represent the feedback, let's say, on behalf of businesses, all sizes, not corporate, usually family-owned, in terms of the impact of national insurance changes and a minimum wage. I've got some working examples supplied by the financial controllers of each business. Some of them did ask to remain anonymous, so I've actually treated everybody the same, and I'll just call them business A, B, C, D. Excuse me. So to start with, business A is an agricultural equipment supplier, but also light construction equipment, turf, domestic and grounds care equipment. They also have a specialist wheel supply and tyre supply business. And we'll get to that more later on. I think people this morning have very graphically explained just how much the industry touches the public, and I'll do that, go to that in my summary. So business A has a turnover of £200 million, so not insignificant, 360 employees, and the impact of the national insurance changes are £370,000. The impact of the minimum wage to their business is £110,000. So up to this point, 480,000. I raised the question to the owner, what about having to address the difference with your skilled technical people versus the increase in the minimum wage? Oh, he said, we haven't thought about that, but we pay well anyway. Now, I said, you might pay well, and I'm sure you do, but you still need to understand the psychological aspect of this, and I think you need to do an assessment of how your skilled people will react. The quick calculation on that was £600,000. So that business is, if it goes all according to plan, is going to see £1 million of hit on their business. Very significant. Business letter B, agricultural supply, light construction, turf, domestic and ground care equipment, and also supplies a very well-known crane into all sectors of the industry. Turnover 170 million, 245 employees, £570,000 national insurance impact, £180,000 of minimum wage impact. I have tabled the question of the difference to address the skill differential, not been done yet. So up to present, their impact is £750,000. Business C, core supply is construction equipment, light, medium and heavy, so a full gamut of equipment. Interestingly, the light business of construction machinery goes into building, as you'd expect, but a massive amount goes into rental and the domestic market. So again, touching, let's call it Joe Public, the man in the street. Medium is into building and business, and heavy is into plant hire, demolition, which we see a lot of, and heavy excavation. A slightly smaller business, nevertheless the impact is significant. 18.5 million turnover, 23 people. National insurance implication is £25,000, and the impact on national wage is £2,500. So £27,500 to that relatively small business. Business D is into farming, storage and general bulk haulage. So very similar to Ed earlier this morning. £18 million turnover, 128 people, £145,000 of national insurance contribution impact, £125,000 of minimum wage. Their calculation on the adjustment to their skilled employees is £340,000. That's a total of 610 into that business. Here's quite an interesting one. Business E, a community-owned pub in rural Norfolk. Quite a common story where the publicans have gone bankrupt and the residents have gotten together and taken over the pub. It has a 50-seat restaurant. It produces or serves up very high-quality food and has an excellent reputation locally. The turnover of the business is £360,000. They have 4 full-time employees and 22 part-time serving staff, etc. The impact of national insurance is £1,500. The impact of the minimum wage is £4,000. And the impact of adjusting the skill of the higher chefs and management team is £13,400. Now, what is interesting to this business is that there are some slight changes in the ENI relief to businesses, which has kind of made the numbers look a little bit unbalanced, but that's the reason for it. So in summary, I've titled this slide as "We like to invest." As industry, agricultural, non-agricultural, we like to invest. We like investing in equipment, we like investing in people, vehicles, infrastructure, and we've heard that from everybody on the stage this morning, and training. And on a note, I don't know whether anybody follows PX Farms on YouTube, but James met the CEO of Spalding's recently, and the first thing that the CEO said was that they are questioning and challenging their approach to trainees and apprenticeships. This will be a disaster for the country. We've spent the last 10 years building apprentices back up to how we work in the 70s and 80s, and all of a sudden, we're looking to take that cost out. With that level of cost that we've seen in the previous slides, or talked about on the previous slides, investment's going to have to be curtailed. It has to be. It's the quickest way to raise the revenues. And that will, of course, mean job losses, unemployment across the country, and without doubtedly, I think it was Jamie said, or maybe Clive, a recession is on the track. The train is on the tracks without question. And the latest figures that were released the other day shows that we're going that way, and Mr. Starmer and Ms. Reeves described it as disappointing. My word, what a worry. Anyway, we're not here to do politics at quite that level. So in summary, it's abundantly clear that the businesses that I showed and talked about cannot absorb the costs that they're going to be faced with. There just isn't the profit in any business to absorb that level of hit. Costs will have to be passed on to the customer, or taken out, apprentices, training, etc. And that will mean, in business, whole goods pricing, so the diggers, the cranes, the tractors, the trucks, will have to go up in pricing. Our repair, when something inevitably breaks down, will have to go up. Parts pricing will have to go up. It's all moved by lorry, distribution warehouses. And of course, the haulage rates will have to go up accordingly. But I think the interesting part, given that Mr. Starmer said that the general public wouldn't be hit or touched, is the cost of goods that we've just talked about and food to the general public. This is going to mean high, massively high, unmeasured inflation, because a lot of what we do in this room won't be on the measurement scale, and it will start heading the country into that recession that I mentioned earlier. We, if you like, would like the government to reconsider its position. That's been said so many times today, not just in the national insurance, the minimum wage, but also inheritance tax, etc. It will undoubtedly cripple the very industries that keep this country alive and have done for generations. That's really me done, ladies and gentlemen. I'd just like to thank the owners of the business, the CEOs and the financial directors that very quickly submitted very professional figures that we could discuss today. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I think we're here, obviously, generational transition and the BPR, APR issue is a big issue for family businesses looking to the future and creating those sustainable businesses. But national insurance is a massive short-term impact. It's going to cause a lot of pain for a lot of businesses. So short-term national insurance is very much on the agenda. Longer term, we need to plan for succession and transition. So both go hand in hand. So Paul, thank you for that. I'd now like to invite Victoria Atkins, who's the Secretary of State for DEFRA, to introduce our next family business speakers. Victoria.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, although I wish we were meeting under happier circumstances. Last time we were together, I was wearing a rather outlandish Union Jack jacket on the lorry at the rally, where 45,000 people came together from all corners of the United Kingdom to try to get the Chancellor, the Prime Minister and this government to listen. Now my job, sadly I'm only the shadow DEFRA Secretary of State. I wish I was the actual Secretary of State because we wouldn't be meeting today if I were. But my job as Shadow Secretary of State is to hold the Secretary of State for DEFRA to account. And I have been doing this with my team of brilliant shadow ministers with Kemi badenoch in the House of Commons as best we can. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we forced a debate and a vote in the House of Commons specifically on APR and BPR, because we did not want those Labour MPs who represent rural constituencies to think that they could hide away behind the finance bill in 6 months' time and vote these changes in. We wanted them to understand what this means for the farms and the family businesses across the United Kingdom, but particularly in their constituencies. And by the way, I'm a proud Lincolnshire Member of Parliament. My constituency of Loutham Horncastle genuinely can lay claim to being one of the breadbaskets of the United Kingdom. So I very much understand the pain. Thank you. And shout out for Lincolnshire, the pain that our farms are going through. But as part of that debate, I asked you to share your stories with me so that I could bring your stories into the chamber of the House of Commons. Because we understand that you're not just numbers on a spreadsheet, you are the families that work day in, day out, whose children are helping out on the farms as soon as they can squeeze a pair of wellies onto their feet. You are the families that this Christmas Day will be having your fun and enjoying Christmas Day, but you'll also be out on the farm, feeding livestock, making sure that everything is ticking over whilst everybody else is enjoying the Christmas lunches that you and other farmers have produced. You are the families that continue working well beyond retirement age, because that's what farming is. It's not a job, it is a way of life, it is a vocation, and it is one that you have passed on through generation to generation. That is what we all want to protect. Now, one of these stories that I gave in the House of Commons were from a couple who wrote to me when I put the call out, please can I have your stories? They wrote to me, and they, I think, show not just the hard work, the commitment, the sacrifice, actually, that people make in farming and family businesses, but they also showed the emotional toll that this uncertainty and having the rug pulled out from under your feet is taking on families up and down the country. And so I'm here today to introduce Steve and Wendy, who can tell their story with great eloquence and great compassion, but also with some pain. Thank you so much, everybody.
Good afternoon. I didn't expect to be on the stage today, but I thought, as a manufacturer, an industrialist, I thought it could be a good place to be. So, a little bit of history. My family, my mum, my dad, my brother and myself started a business in the 1970s when I was a young man. When I left school, engineering was our thing, so both me and my brother trained as engineers. We've since gone on to build a fairly substantial business up in Derbyshire. Now that wasn't easy actually to do, because we had to fight against the planners. So in 1988, we actually applied for change of use on a farm, so I feel that we're really one of the first families, should I say, to actually diversify. So that diversification has been, correct myself. So actually, at appeal, we managed to get past the pig park and we got our planning permission granted. So since that point, we've had constant, it's borrow the money, work and invest back in your company. And that's what we've done for the last 34 years. My father retired at 88 during COVID. My grandfather worked with us. When he retired, when he was in his mid-60s, he worked with us, and I had the opportunity to work with him for 16 years in our company. So my mum worked till she was 73 in our company. And I feel that we've just been led astray. Everything we thought we were working for over all those years of constant effort. I could say, and I've said to to other people that talk to me, I'm brain damaged with work and time and effort that I've put in that factory to make it work. I mean, now, we do all our own maintenance, we do everything. I'm very lucky, I've got a good team of people close team of people that I consider as close friends that I work with. My son-in-law now works for me. My daughter works for me. My brother, who's his son and his daughter work for the firm. But we find ourselves in a very strange predicament. My dad is now 92. My mum passed away 2 years ago, so her shares have had to transfer. They transferred to my father, but you have to hold your shares. So he couldn't. There's been a little bit of a company reorganisation, so me and my brother ended up demerging 2 or 3 years ago. So my mum and dad have had to hold their shares. We didn't know what was going to happen in the budget, so my mum's shares passed to my father. My father now is faced with a £550,000 bill because of this change at the stroke of a pen from a government that doesn't want to understand. And I think that's the problem. They just simply don't want to understand. They don't want to know our stories. They don't want to know where we've come from. They don't want to know our struggles. So
we aren't on our own.
No, we're not on our own. Absolutely. So I thought, right, how can we diversify our business yet again? My daughter says to me, Dad, you've got more ideas than time in your head. I'm always full of energy. I'm always full of the zest for life. But I think it's been dragged away from me. And I feel deflated. I feel, I don't know. I can't explain.
Can I just tell you all that when the farmers, I'm the farming part of the duo. I obviously help Steve with the business as well, but I was brought up on a tenanted farm. I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and we all grew up doing everything a man can do, and probably bake the Sunday lunch at the same time. But we were lucky enough to be able to borrow enough money to buy the small farm next to where I was brought up, which was tenanted. And it needed a bit of work, to be quite honest. And over the last 34 years, the profits from the business, we've invested in that farm because obviously there's no profit to be had in farming, especially when you're buying it from scratch. I know we're looking at a lot of generational farmers and you've got your own problems, but from our point of view, we've invested everything we've got into the farm, and currently I've got a small herd of Derbyshire Gritstons, which we both enjoy. You have a bit of time off the factory to go and help haymake. The whole family comes together and does it. It's a familiar story. We're in it for the life's work, isn't it? It's not for the profit necessarily. It's all invested back in.
It is.
So when all the farmers were down in London a few weeks ago, I was stuck up at the farm thinking, do you know what? I feel like I'm not doing anything towards this. So I just penned a very quick letter to Elizabeth because I'd heard of...
Victoria.
Sorry, Victoria, yes, Victoria. I'm so sorry.
Elizabeth is the Queen.
I'd heard her talking in Parliament, and I thought, this is. I'm just going to tell it like it is. And I just wrote it all down, pretty much what I've just said to you. Coming from a tenanted farm, putting everything into the farm that we now own. He's in industry. I've never seen him so stressed. He had a bleed on the brain in June. It could have been sayonara. He's made a brilliant recovery, but who's going to insure him to cover all this?
Nobody.
That we've now got. We would have to sell the farm that we've worked so hard to create from nothing. So it's very, very distressing.
Just one other point. I don't want to bore anybody. I thought, well, I'd try to pass on some investment. Okay. So we've managed to secure an industrial site with B1, B2 and B8 use in Chesterfield. Now we've managed to purchase at a massive cost to ourselves and mostly from the bank, this 7-acre site. Now it's a greenfield site with brownfield. So at the moment we're using part of it for a stockyard relating to the business, but the rest of it, there's 4 acres of developable land there. Now, that I was wanting to get single-use businesses into probably 20,000 square foot buildings, which is a fair size building, but I find myself wondering whether I should be investing £2 to £3 million in making that project happen. I find myself, why would I do that? Why would I do that?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
All I can say is family business matters. It matters to the heart, and you can see the emotion there from a couple that have put their life and soul into building a business, and they can't quite see where the future is now. We wish them all the best of luck. Now on to our second panel, which is going to be chaired by Emily Sheffield. Emily is the former editor of the Evening Standard, former deputy editor of British Vogue, communist. So let's start again. Emily is the former editor of the Evening Standard, former deputy editor of British Vogue, a columnist, a broadcaster, and a board trustee for the Institute of Contemporary Art, and also works in AI. She's joined on our panel by some fantastic people who are going to share their insights: Johnathan Roberts, Jeremy Moody, Tom McMullen, and Kate Nichols. Emily, the floor's all yours.
Thank you, everybody, and I hope you can hear me clearly. I thought I was going for a checkup at the dentist this morning, and in fact I had 4 fillings, so I can't actually feel half of my face at the moment, but I can just about speak, even if I can't really swallow. Now, before I come to our brilliant expert panel, I just wanted to take the opportunity to paint a little of the political backdrop of this budget, because I do think this needs to be clear. And as Paul rightly kindly pointed out, I'm a political commentator, journalist. I have to be clear, I am biased in this particular discussion, so not an unbiased journalist in this particular topic. And what I would like people to understand, and I'm sure most of you do, is that prior to this election, the incoming Labour government didn't want to be clear about the tax rises it knew it was going to have to make. It was incredibly scared of a rerun of 1992, and this was despite them being 20 points ahead in the polls. So what they promised to the electorate ahead of this election was that they would not do any tax rises, and they ruled out income tax, VAT, and NI contributions. Now, I would say, and they would deny, this was an outright lie on their part. They knew full well they would have to do tax rises. I personally believe, and this is not everyone's belief, that this was an act of cowardice on their part, because in 2010, when David Cameron was fighting an election against Gordon Brown, he made it very clear to the election that tax rises would be coming, and it probably cost them winning outright and put them into a coalition. But it was their belief that if you are going to hammer various portions or sectors of the electorate, you must be clear and have a mandate for doing that. Labour did not. So once in government, everything has flowed from those promises that they wouldn't rise tax money, they wouldn't put in tax rises on income, VAT, and NI contributions. And I believe the reason so many people in the business communities are so angry is that they then came for all of you and pretty much no one else for that tax money. Now, this was a political decision on behalf of Labour. They boxed themselves in because they didn't have the guts to be honest with the electorate. Now I'm going to come to our brilliant panel. Now we've got 4 brilliant people here today who have been very voluble on this topic and are complete experts in each of their fields. So we have Kate Nichols, who's the CEO of UK Hospitality. We have Jeremy Moody, who's been Secretary and Advisor to the CAAV since 1995, and he was closely involved with the Agricultural Tenancies Act in 1995 as an instance of how expert he is. And then we've got Johnathan Roberts, who's from the Country Land and Business Association and has been speaking out for many weeks now since the budget. And also very glad that Tom McMullen has made it here today, who's the Joint Managing Director of McMullen's Brewery, a 198-year-old brewery in Hertfordshire. He is also a farmer and a former corporate tax lawyer in the city, so he definitely knows what he's talking about. Now, just before we start, I don't know if some of you have arrived recently, and I'm just going to repeat back many facts that all of you know, but we do need to keep making sure that the general public, voters, understand the huge cost to business that recent budget put in place. So family firms pay 200 billion in tax receipts annually in this country. The oldest family firm dates back to 1515. There are 4.8 million family firms in the UK who employ between them a staggering 13.8 million people. They generate 1.7 trillion in turnover. And it has been calculated that these changes at the recent budget can reduce economic activity by 9.4 billion. James Dyson, the founder of Dyson, began his firm as a small family firm, and he was one of the first voices to come out and fight for many of you. And it suited the current government to try and paint him as some grasping rich man trying to lower his tax bill. He is one of the highest taxpayers in this country, and as he wrote in his letter to the Telegraph, he began as a small family firm. And he has said, and I completely agree with him, the combination of national insurance increases and changes to an inheritance tax on family businesses will kill entrepreneurship, snuff out wealth creation, and stunt growth in the economy. He went on to say, destruction of British family-owned businesses, especially, is an egregious act of self-harm. Now, Johnathan Roberts, I'd like to come to you first. Do you agree with what James Dyson has said, and why?
Look, I think this has probably been the biggest attack on, let's call it the rural way of life, but particularly the family farm, for a generation or more. And it's not just about this particular tax change. There's so many different things that are going on at the moment where costs are rising. I mean, in normal times, we might be talking more about things like the fertiliser tax, which has hardly even got a mention because there have been so many other attacks. And I think the crucial thing for us all to remember is how unnecessary this is. Because if the Chancellor of the Exchequer came to you and came to us and said, look, we need to get more money into the coffers because we found ourselves in a black hole, how can we do that? Well, look, pretty much anybody who's ever worked in business of any type, whether it's farming or any other type, would say, right, we need to go for growth. Because we all know that if you have a bigger pie, then there's more money going into the Exchequer. And that was more or less the basis on which they were elected. And people could get on board with that. Finally, we might have a better planning system, they said. Finally, we may have a better approach to housing. Maybe it'll be a bit easier to run our businesses. And that was the message going into the general election. And we've had nothing. We've had nothing of that growth agenda since. We've just had more tax, more tax, more tax, in a way that I think only Treasury officials could really come up with. People who've never run a business, people who've never set foot on a farm before. So we're not going to get growth, and we're going to have less tax, not more tax, which means the Chancellor is going to need to come back to us at the next budget and say we need even more.
By that you mean, in fact, this will work out as less tax receipts in the end for the Treasury.
We've heard all morning. Business after business after business saying, I'm withdrawing investment in their business.
Tom, I'd like to come to you next because you run a family business that's been around for many decades. Please outline what family businesses do in local communities, because I think we've had a great deal of emotional response to farmers, but move around the country in many areas where this government has promised to raise growth and raise a standard of living, but it seems to have gone after the very firms who are at the heart of these communities.
Yes, I suppose we have a very simple business purpose, and it's actually to ensure that generations can rely on Max, which is kind of the nickname for our business. And when we talk about generations, it's not about generations of the shareholders, but it's also generations of suppliers. You know, we have supply relationships that go back to 1830. It's generations of our team, many of whom have worked for us for many generations, their grandparents, great-grandparents, etc. Generations of our guests who seem to like what we do, and actually also generations of the Treasury. You know, fundamentally over my lifetime working for the business, we will probably raise about £1 billion worth of tax in a relatively small business. So our entire business mantra is to understand that people rely on us. And really my job is to ensure that those various stakeholders, both within a generation and between generations, that their needs are balanced. And what this risk to APR and BPR really represents is one of those parties knocking the entire ecosystem out of balance to everybody's detriment. And ironically, as the point was just made, also to the Treasury's detriment.
Can you just try and, I suppose, spell out when, you know, the reduction of this business property tax, what is actually going to happen? What is actually going to happen to small family firms over the coming years?
I mean, I suppose if I sort of wind it a little bit back, the Treasury's stock response to everything at the moment seems to be, there's a black hole. I think my stock response is, stop digging. Once we kind of get over that, the next thing they're going to say is, oh, is this really net detrimental to the Treasury? And of course there is the CBI report, but all we can do is look at our own business. And we have a particular challenge, is that inheritance tax is not just paid on death, it's paid by discretionary trusts. And we use discretionary trusts not as tax mitigation tools, because actually there are no tax on the share, or was no tax on the shares that they hold, but we use it as ways of separating financial interest from control. And that's how you ensure stability for generations. You know, I can't forecast who in the 7th generation is the horse I need to back. We use discretionary trusts to sort of ensure that stability. Now, unfortunately, discretionary trusts at the moment are proposed to get a tax charge on every 10 years of their settlement. It's at 3% of its wealth. And the challenge with that is, if I take one that's due to be taxed in 2026, it's going to have a bill of about 240,000. Now, the only assets it holds are the shares in the business. There is no liquidity on a buy side or the sell side. The trust can't get any value out of those shares. They will have to come to the underlying business. Now, to get 240 of that tax charge, you've got to move money via the beneficiaries. They're going to have to pay distribution tax. So all of a sudden, we've got to move 390,000 just to that one taxpayer. We're a corporate. You've got to treat all shareholders equally. So all of a sudden, we find that we are moving proposing to move 6.7 million out of the business to people who don't necessarily need or want it to pay a £240,000 tax bill. Now, the revenue will get a bounce in its first year, so they're excited by that. But 6.7 million in our business generally supports about 110 workers. We pay 14 different taxes. On that 6.7, just 4 of those taxes alone will generate about £1 million worth of tax receipts a year. So within 3 years, the revenue will be detrimentally affected. Within the 10-year window that exists, because these tax charges come in every 10 years, in our business, the Treasury will actually be down over £7 million. So, and this is why we are so keen that the focus remains laser-like on ultimately the impact on the Treasury, following that impact on public services. And I think when the public are aware that the Treasury is cutting off its nose to spite its face, then we will get political movement.
So it's not only a tax on jobs, is what you're saying, is that there will be no uptick from this. There don't seem to be any positives. It's a short-term gain for, long-term pain. I understand, and I think a lot of people understand, the NHS post-pandemic is in a lot of trouble. But the way they have constructed this is hitting those who are the engine of growth in this country, and it doesn't even make any sense in the long term.
I think we have to take.
It doesn't make economic sense in the long term.
I think we have to take that conversation further, and it's what is the impact on public services, because that's the bit we'll get the public on board. And I think there was a question asked earlier about why the farmers are leading, why businesses haven't come in so fast behind. we're one of the members of the Independent Family Brewers of Britain, and there's been lots of conversation about when we should come out in solidarity with the family farmers. And actually the reality is we're waiting for the conversation to move from succession, inheritance, asset sales, until it gets to, I think, where we are almost at, which is what this means is an erosion of the tax base, reduced receipts for the Treasury, and therefore that must flow through to detrimental public services.
But also reduced investment in family firms, and people are sitting around right now having conversations about job cuts.
I mean, realistically, you're right. That's 6.7 million that's going to come out. It's either going to come out of future investment, or it's going to come out of our existing factors of production, our assets, and yes, there are jobs associated with that.
So I just wanted to come to you briefly, Kate. My husband runs restaurants, I need to be clear, so I do understand what's going on in hospitality right now, but we're talking about BPR and we're talking about family firms here, and again, I just want to keep coming back to this point, is that a lot of family firms make up the very sort of fabric of our society. People often think, many people in London, especially around Westminster, they think of the restaurant and hospitality business being this great, lovely, glitzy sort of arrangement in big cities. But we're talking about small communities where a lot of where these family hospitality businesses are based. So you hear a lot of these voices. Just talk me through what they're saying to you.
Well, I think you're right. You know, you're looking at hospitality businesses and they are across the community, and they are often, the family businesses are in areas of the greatest economic deprivation across our rural and coastal communities, as well as in our town and city centres.
But they're in our high streets,
and they're in our high streets as well. So they are in every part of every community, and they provide jobs and growth and opportunities for those who are often the furthest from the jobs market, and they are local jobs. So they are able to provide work and meaningful opportunities for people who are walking to work, mums who are working while they're having children, and they're also an integral part of a local ecosystem. And I think that often gets overlooked. You know,
suppliers.
The supply chain will often be local farmers, local food manufacturers, local artisan producers, local brewers will be providing a route through. And
but also tourism in sort of larger regional cities like York.
Yes.
The restaurants there, the hospitality, the pubs. This is a huge draw for tourists.
It's a huge draw for tourists. It's a £140 billion sector of the economy. It's 5% of GDP. It's 11% of employment. 3.5 million people work. And crucially, it generates almost 40% of that turnover goes back to the exchequer in the form of taxes funding vital public services. That 54 billion is roughly the police and security budget. You look at, again, the thing that people keep saying is, you know, you're looking ahead, as Tom very eloquently said, you're looking ahead at future investment, but actually we have a cliff edge and a huge tsunami of extra costs and taxes coming in April of this year, and it's hitting those that are the lowest paid on part-time work, and it's hitting those rural job opportunities, businesses, and it's going to increase prices for consumers. So before we get to how do we pass on that asset as a family business, how do we make sure we're supporting those family businesses in the ecosystem across our communities, you've got this deluge of tax, £3.4 billion of extra tax.
And that's before we even come to Angela Rayner's workers' bill, which is going to increase complexity for so many businesses, especially in hospitality, where you've got a very high proportion of your business is human.
Well, this is a hugely regressive tax that was introduced in the budget. It hits the lowest paid part-time workers. So for somebody in our sector who works 20 hours a week on minimum wage, the effective tax rate for the employer in that sector is 75%. It's gone up by. For somebody who's full-time on national living wage, the tax has gone up by 37%. So we're seeing for many of these family businesses, rural businesses in particular, a third of them are operating at or below break-even. A quarter of them have no cash reserves. So they simply won't withstand the economic shock. So there will be nothing to pass on because they will just hand in the keys, close the businesses. That's what we're hearing from an awful lot of them. And 85% of our sector saying they're going to have to cut staff hours and headcount.
I think this is something that is really misunderstood by those who don't own businesses and run businesses and have dragged those businesses through incredibly challenging periods, including the pandemic, is the emotional toll
that it takes on those who are running those businesses, and this idea that they will just pack up because they feel there's no hope.
But those local family pubs and restaurants, they're employing 20 to 30 people directly, a huge number in the supply chain. Our local hotels, many of those are family businesses. They are employing about 100 people. And so when you lose those assets, if they decide to close because of the cumulative tax and regulatory burden, or they feel that they can't go on, that's job losses throughout a local community, but it's assets and community spaces that are lost for good.
But making up these local high streets, because you're talking about hospitality, but retail goes hand in hand. It's about bringing people into small town centres, large town centres, and as I've said, in small villages across the whole of the country, and I'm someone who does travel, my family live up north, I travel a lot, these are often villages which are literally the only local employment is in hospitality, is in local retail, and these are huge tourism drivers. And again, tourism doesn't seem to be talked about enough. Tourism brings in billions upon billions of pounds of revenue.
Well, our foreign visitors spend more eating and drinking out in our hospitality venues across the UK than all of our food and drink exports put together. It's our second largest export earner, and it's the fastest growing, but we put it into reverse at our peril.
Jeremy, I'm going to come to you with one thing, but I just want one last question to Kate. I get a lot of people just saying, and I've had many discussions with my husband about this, why not just, pass more costs over to your consumer? And I can tell you what most people say in hospitality right now as well. We've already passed huge costs over. There comes a point where no one's going to keep paying.
There comes a point when customers won't pay,
Yeah.
and then you see reduced footfall, you see reduced demand, and you see reduced volumes. If we were to pass on that £3.4 billion of extra costs and taxes in prices to our consumers, we're going to have to put our prices up by around 10 to 15%. That's not sustainable.
That makes empty restaurants, empty lunch times.
Yeah, and so you have the law of diminishing returns that Tom was describing, because if you turn that footfall away, we're property intensive and we're labour intensive, and that £54 billion of tax that
as
we
is
generate
retail, as is
will
many
just go.
sectors. Yeah, Jeremy, I want to come to you last because this with BPR, staggeringly, this is James Callaghan introduced this Labour in 1976. So Rachel Reeves, who, by the way, has never run a business of her own, and has spent most of her career as an opposition MP, which I can tell you is not that much hard work compared to someone who is running a business. I don't understand that they're actually reversing something that Labour brought in. And one of their big, and this again comes back to a big communications campaign that is coming from within Westminster, they are deliberately trying to put very confusing tax messages out because they want the public to not support you. I've got to say, you have to sort of work in politics to understand what's happening right now. Can you just clarify for everybody in simple messages why, from a tax perspective, this just doesn't make sense?
Well, thank you. I think the first point to make is that this is simply, that the tax measure here is simply one that converts owners' capital into current public spending, and in doing so, crowding out private investment. And it's right at the start, as Johnathan was talking about, growth is what is needed. That requires capital and it requires business enterprise, and this undermines both. You allude to 1976. There is an awful lot going on at the moment, which is simply the revisiting of past mistakes. 1976 was the first point at which Labour started unpicking its capital transfer tax of 1975 at the rates of tax that it introduced then. And the introduction of business property relief was the first step in terms of what is now the inheritance tax that has been at 100% since 1992. And so the position then is simply that we are now being asked to go through the hoops all over again, at cost to the businesses as has just been described. There are a number of areas where the discussion has been very muddled. It is avoiding, muddying the waters to talk about the nil rate bands at this point. So I think it is worth just going a little bit further into the detail. The Treasury is suggesting that, of course, not just the million, and any number of family members you're apparently unable to conjure up for the purposes of business planning, Conventionally, it takes about 25 years to get somebody from conception through to adult participation in the business, but we're obviously assumed to do it quite quickly here. But the nil rate bands that are transferable between spouses, that assumes, the main nil rate band assumes that you have no personal effects. You don't even own the bed that you die in. They're assuming that can be put all against the business. No, most people, particularly when we get to April 27 and the pension funds come in, most people are going to have enough call on that nil rate band before the business. And similarly, the £175,000 is on a house that you give to a lineal descendant. Well, for many, that will be outside the business, and even in farming, where it may be within the business, it's normally on the excess above agricultural value that is taxed already, so it doesn't come into play on that. And of course, tenants can't give the house down anyway. So the misleading presentation that there's 3 million you can give down for a married couple, technically, in very, very special and particular circumstances, you can do it, but not most ordinary people. And this is where waters are being muddied on all of this. So work from the million, look at the hit that has, spread it over 10 years, look at your income that you've got to pay that, and then think about whether you can invest. And I think that's the real economic message in this, going back right to where Johnathan started on growth. Without capital, without investment, without business spirit, there is no growth, despite all the language that the government has used.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Now, I'm afraid, we can keep talking, and I did want to take some questions from the audience, but we've run over a little bit. So I'm going to have to thank our panel very, very much, because we've got Kemi Badenoch waiting to come on stage. So thank you so much for joining me, and we'll keep the good fight up. Thank you.
Emily, thank you very much to the panel. Panellists, thank you very much again. Never in a million years did I think I'd be standing on the stage at the London Palladium at Christmas in 2024 as the CEO of Family Business United, celebrating and championing family businesses like we are with Olly and the team, and about to announce our keynote speaker this afternoon, the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's certainly panto season, and as Paul said, this isn't where I thought I'd be spending mid-Christmas. And then you wouldn't believe the stuff that they have backstage as well. It's fantastic. This is how I'm starting my panto season, and hopefully I'll be able to get my kids out very soon. But what I have to discuss today really is no joke. And I just wanted to let all of you know that as the Conservative Party leader, and also as an MP for a rural constituency, a constituency that has many small businesses, I understand what it is that you are dealing with. I'm here to let you know that we get it. We have experienced very much what you are seeing because we have business backgrounds as well. If you look at the shadow cabinet, you will see people who have started businesses, who run family businesses, who understand what it is that is required in order to keep all of your enterprises going. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. Why is BPR so important? And I know you've had lots of panelists, and Emily has been conducting really good conversations, but at the end of the day, what matters is what the politicians understand, what we think, and what we are doing. So I'm here to give you the Conservative Party's perspective. Why is BPR so important? The aim of business property relief is to ensure that family businesses are not broken up or sold on the death of the owner. Family businesses are different, they are special. Farms are the sine qua non. Everyone knows how hard it is to keep a farm going, and it is often only the people within the family who understand how the business works and how to keep it surviving. And so that's why we're really disappointed that Labour is cutting that 100% relief for assets over £1 million. We know that scrapping BPR is going to be incredibly damaging. Yes, it is true, we do need to fund public services, but you have to do that in the right way. It's no good simply rushing somewhere and grabbing money you can see. If you damage the business that's underneath, it will not be able to create more growth, more profit, more taxes for the next year. We have to do this in the right way. If inheritance tax applies to these assets that small businesses have painstakingly built over time, they may not exist again. And that is why we are opposed to the decisions that they have made on agricultural property relief and on business property relief. This decision is going to drain investment and growth out of the British economy. And my team have been doing a lot of research into what the impact of this new change is going to be. Research done by CBI Economics shows that Labour's changes to BPR could cause 125,000 job losses. So just for some context, that figure is equivalent to the entire population of Blackburn. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of jobs. Where are they going to go afterwards? The CBI also said that those changes would mean family businesses will have to cut investment. They'll have to cut it by over 16%. They'll also have to reduce headcount. So it's not just about no longer being able to invest in the business, it's about removing jobs which currently exist, 10.2%, losing turnover of 7.4%. That is a lot. In aggregate, it comes to about £2.6 billion of a loss in tax revenue. The government says it is doing these things to raise taxes. We believe that actually it's going to shrink the tax take because it will destroy the businesses that provide that income. CBI Economics also says it will hit total economic output by 9.4 billion. That 85% of family businesses plan to decrease that investment. More than half of them, more than half of family businesses think that they're going to be letting people go. We cannot afford this. And I think that as an opposition, we need to make sure that we are holding the government to account. I'm not here to make lots of jokes about them. You would have heard all the jokes about CVs and them never running a business and needing freebies, but I think this is really serious. It is really serious. We need the government to understand how business works. If you look at the economy today, you'll find that fewer and fewer people are entrepreneurs. Our economy is becoming more and more bureaucratic. We have fewer people starting businesses. We have fewer people going into agriculture. It's too difficult. Everyone wants to do what's easy. And so we end up creating a bureaucratic class that doesn't really understand how stuff works. And when people like that get into government, they make changes like the ones we've seen to APR and BPR, which are damaging. And that is why today I can tell you that we will reverse this damaging tax grab at the earliest opportunity. It is absolutely essential that we go back to how things work. We had a budget in March that was able to deliver funding for public services without this sort of damaging tax cut. It can be done again. The reason why Labour is going for these taxes is because it's choosing to spend money in places that it does not need to, places that are not essential public services. But we understand the contribution small and family business make to the UK economy. You often hear us talking about being the party of business. Sometimes people think that we're the party of big business. We are not. We are the party of entrepreneurs. We're the party of every business. Because we know that it is not government that creates growth. It is business that creates growth. And actually, a lot of the time, government needs to get out of the way. And that's what I'm offering you today. The Conservative Party is under new leadership. We know that we made a lot of mistakes. We're not here to pretend that everything was fine when we were in government. And life is difficult, times are tough, not just in this country, but across the world. But I know that if we don't do right by those people who are starting out, who are entrepreneurs, who are creating small businesses, family businesses, medium-sized enterprises, we're not going to have those big businesses of the future. And we also need to think about the next generation. I am very worried that many young people look out and feel that there is no hope for them. They can't afford their student loans, they can't afford mortgages, they can't afford to start a family. We need to give them hope. I would like to see so many more of them doing what you do. Everyone in this audience remembers when they first started their business or when they first took over from their parent or from their grandparent and what that was like. You had hope, you had optimism, you thought tomorrow was going to be a lot better. Many young people today do not believe that tomorrow is going to be better. And we need to change that. So we will reverse this damaging tax, and we won't just have a charm offensive with you like other parties telling you what you want to hear. We are going to show you that we understand and that we are going to deliver. So on behalf of the Conservative Party, I want to say thank you for bringing this to us, and I want to let you know that we are on your side. We understand what you're dealing with, and we are going to fix it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Kemi. I'm about to, I think, find a few people in the audience to ask some questions. I just wanted to add, to pick up on something Kemi says, is that the word red tape is often sort of thrown around, but actually what anyone who runs a business understands, and my mother began her first business when she was 16, my husband runs a business, my sister runs a business, I have run a business, my brother runs a business, is red tape actually means rising costs. When this government come back and said, oh, we think when all these businesses will go to their accountants and then they'll realise we're not really doing them any damage, well, you think people who run a business don't talk to their accountants? I mean, that can only be said by someone who doesn't run a business. But also that every time you pick up the phone to a tax advisor, you are actually sent a bill for that. And that's what red tape actually incurs. Red tape actually adds layer after layer after layer of costs to your business that you could otherwise be using to employ more people, invest more money, and grow your business for our joint economy. Now, I can't see very well because
I
of the bright
actually
lights.
wanted to do the first
Okay.
question. I'm going to take the liberty to do that, and it's a little bit of a curveball. So, first question. When you were at school, what did you want to be? And did you ever think you'd be sat on stage at the Palladium talking about businesses?
First of all, no, I never thought that I would be sat on stage at the Palladium during Panto season. So I can already see the newspaper headlines. But this is no joke, as I tell everyone. This is very serious. And there's a thing that's written here about Robin Hood, and I was going to make a joke about Rachel Reeves being Robin Hood, only that she's taking both from the rich and the poor. But I wasn't sure that it was going to land well. Did I want to be on stage when I was a child? I think I wanted to be a pop star. I think all children want to be pop stars. And I wanted to be a doctor, like my dad, and I wanted to do all sorts of things. The one thing I never thought I'd be doing was politics. I sort of fell into it accidentally. So here I am, and I'm doing the very best I can. And hopefully you will think I'm doing a good job.
Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is John McGurk. This is in two parts, if I may. I'm in the automotive industry, and I've got a commercial property investment business. I've been in business for 20 years. It's a family-run company, and I started in 2002. I employ a number of local people from local families in a small village in Warwickshire. Last year, I paid 67% tax on the income I had generated, and this is the smallest amount I could possibly get away with paying. This year, with raised national insurance, that figure will grow, and I have nothing left to reinvest and to help my business grow. After some consideration, I worked out that I could move to Portugal. My business could perform 50% less, and I would have to make people redundant, but I would actually be better off. My first question is, why should I stay? The next point is that this room today is full of very hard-working people. Today our energy has been directed away from where our focus should be, which is on growth for our businesses, our communities, and of course our country. Shouldn't there be a flat rate of tax across the board that's low enough to not warrant tax avoidance planning, but equally substantial enough to satisfy the UK's economy?
Thank you. So I'll take both those questions in turn. My answer might be longer than usual, just to give a bit of context. I, before being Leader of the Opposition, was the Trade Secretary and Business Secretary. And I travelled all around the world, as far as New Zealand, Mexico, Italy, India, the Gulf. And what I saw is other countries being very, very serious about making sure that they have growth and productivity in their country at a time when I feel we are often distracted by many trivial things. We've stopped being serious about how to deliver these things. And we've made an assumption that everything's always going to be fine, that this country is always going to be wealthy. And what we need to do is figure out how to share that wealth out, rather than how to create that wealth. We are living off the work the previous generations did. We need to start creating for the next set of generations, rather than just living off that inheritance. And that's what is fundamental to the first question you asked. Why should you stay? When other economies are competing for your business, they're competing for your talent, they're competing for your productivity. You should stay because we are going to fix this. I tell people a lot of the time that the system is broken, and they don't understand what it is that I mean by that. It's that we are wired for an old world, a world of the 80s and 90s, not for the world that we live in now, where information travels so quickly, where you have aggressive competition from economies like China, and where we continue regulating ourselves to very high standards, which we should do, but in a way that other countries don't follow, which puts us at a disadvantage, which means that there's no level playing field if you're a farmer, for example, and many others. And we need to start thinking differently. And quite often when I say these things, it doesn't get much traction. You know, it's easier for me to talk about sandwiches and get on the front pages of the newspapers than to talk about productivity. This is the world we live in. We have to become more serious. So you should stay, because we're going to fix this, but you should stay because the fundamentals of the UK are still quite unique. What we have here, in terms of the quality of our education, the standards, the regulatory standards, the rule of law, all of these are reasons why people still want to invest in this country. And we have been making it more difficult for them. Some of that, I admit, happened with us for good reasons. We brought in regulations, but actually we need to start thinking about how to encourage the best and the brightest to invest in this country, not elsewhere, but also how to make sure that we keep good people. When we talk about net migration, people focus on who's coming into the country. I worry about who's leaving, because the numbers matter, but who is staying, who is coming in, who is leaving, that matters more. And we need to make sure that we keep all of our talent in this country so that we can have something to hand over to the next generation. The second question you asked was about a flat tax. And this is an idea that I've heard many times. It's very attractive. But if we're going to get to that sort of scenario, there's a lot of work we will need to do firsthand. At the moment, we are a welfare state with a little bit of an economy attached to it. We've got to turn that around. We cannot afford flat taxes where we are now. We need to make sure we rewire our economy so that we can lighten the burden of tax and of regulation on individuals and on those businesses that are just starting out in particular. People see the businesses that close, they don't see the businesses that never started in the first place. And I'm quite worried about that, because those are the seeds for the next generation. Thank you.
I think we have one more question here.
Hello, my name is Janine Bloor. I'm an entrepreneur. I've set a business up from scratch and latterly sold it. I work very hard with my husband, who is a farmer and also has an agricultural machinery business, and we're based up in Staffordshire. Originally, I was just discussing one simple question which you have already answered, which, just to reiterate, can you see a better route than the current one out of this situation? And what would you do with BPR? I do know your answers to that question. So really, to echo everybody's energy in this room and huge talent and entrepreneurship that we have, as leader of the opposition, this is a very urgent situation, and we don't have the energy. We have to look after our businesses and keep the economy going, and we need to galvanise a much wider audience. And what can you do to help us galvanise the whole business community to make sure that the current government really listen to you and we can vote you back in quickly?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. I think that it's important that I actually emphasize what it is we are going to do, but why we are going to do it. So I have said that we will reverse this. And when you say that you're going to scrap a tax that's been brought in, people will ask, well, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? And my principle is that if I don't believe the tax will actually raise any money because people will change their behavior, then there's no point having it. And I know that this will be the case with agricultural property relief. I know that this is the case with what they've done with independent schools. It won't raise any money. It's just charging some people a lot extra. The same thing is going to happen with BPR. People will change their behavior. And then all of a sudden, we will find that we've penalised quite a few business people, but we're not raising the money that we want to raise for public services. Even what the Treasury estimates it's going to raise, I think, is not worth the aggro that they're creating for people. So where we do not believe that money is going to come from a tax change, we will not have it. And that is why I'm very happy to confirm that we will be reversing not just APR, but BPR. But on the second question of how we can continue putting pressure on the government and holding the government to account, the petition that we had, Stop the Farm Tax, has been very, very, very influential. We're finding out where the problem is most acute, and then we can work with local communities to make sure the pressure is brought to bear, not just on the people in the cabinet, but actually individual MPs. And I say this as an MP myself. You do not know the power that you have. You focus it locally on those individuals who should be standing in the way of this change, but are going along with it. You will have many members of parliament who have probably voted in favour of this. You need to let them know how you feel, and we will support you in that wherever we can. We need to make sure that in holding the government to account, we bring the rest of the public with us. At the moment, people, especially those in urban communities, have thought, oh, this is something just about farmers. It's got nothing to do with me. It's just like the miners' strike. It's just something that impacts a small group of people. What I can do as leader of the opposition is show the knock-on effect, how it's going to impact everybody. What happens to farmers impacts everybody. What happens to small business owners impacts everyone. It impacts your community. Your prices will go up, jobs will disappear, the supply chain starts to fragment. That's one of the things that we can do. We need to tell the story of why this matters, not just to those of us who are sitting in here, or those who might be watching on TV. It matters to every single person in our society. And we have a platform to tell those stories. That's what I will be doing as leader of the opposition, telling your story so that even those people who are not directly impacted understand that one way or another, they will pay the price too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and Kemi, thank you so much. We know how busy you are, so thank you so much for finding the time again.
Can I just say thank you to you, Emily, and also to the people who organised this, Martin, Paul, Andrew, I think Olly and Clive. They've done such a fantastic job, and they actually help provide my office, my team, my MPs, Vicky Atkins, who's the Shadow Secretary of State for the Environment. They've given us a lot of information, which has shown us what's really going on. So I wanted to thank them as well for giving us a line to you and letting you know that we are here to support you. Thank you, everybody.
Just as we conclude, can I ask all the speakers that have presented and been part of panels today just to meet us in the far corner here, just for a photo, just before they leave. Family Business United is here to celebrate family businesses, and we do that every day. We need your stories and your news to help amplify the family business voice. That's what we do. My last words really are, family businesses are what put the great into Great Britain. Family business really matters. It's been a real honour to host today, work with Olly and his team, championing family business, and actually trying to bring more of a collective voice together, and hopefully we can do more in the new year to continue to amplify the family business voice, farming and non-family together collectively. Paul Andrews, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today, and I'm going to hand over to Olly for the last word. Thank you very much.
I'm not going to keep you too much longer. We were going to come on and do the can-can, but we forgot our costumes. And we also realised none of us could dance. Yeah, it's my job really to thank everyone. Thank the Lloyd Webber family for this fantastic building once again, and all the staff that basically did and all the staff at the Palladium that thought they were having a day off as well. Yeah, does it end now? What's next? So that's always the question after we did the rally of the week. What's next? What's next? I think we talked about a fire before burning. So one of the things that we're encouraging farmers to do, I can appreciate if you've got a factory, don't set fire to the roof, but any farmers on New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, if they want to go to the highest point and light a fire and we'll have a beacon of hope. I think that might be quite cool to get 75,000 beacons going throughout the country. But one thing you can all do if you can't set fire to your business is... There's loads of pyrotechnics here as well. We could have had something, but maybe not. Encourage you to write to your MPs. We need to fill their mailboxes, whether it's email or actual mailboxes. and get your employers to do it as well, because they really do have to respond and read them, and that pressure, we need to keep it on. You've all probably going to have a little bit of time over Christmas to do that. When you're fed up with the in-laws or whatever, you can go on and do that. So my in-laws might watch this video, they're amazing anyway, so. But I know some people don't. Yeah, so thank you all for coming. I wish you all a safe journey home, a Merry Christmas, and hopefully a prosperous New Year. Thank you.